Welcome back to the dark side of Michael Jackson's This Is It. This is part 204. Please make sure you watch part 1 before watching this part, as it sets the stage for everything we'll be talking about here and for the remainder of the series. Before I give you a recap of what we discussed in part 1, I'd like to address some of the girls in the balcony. It's never my intention to be disrespectful, harmful, or cruel towards Michael Jackson with my memes or jokes. Y'all know I love MJ down, that's my man, and I'ma stick beside him. This is tough subject matter, so a savage likes to get her kikis in, and perhaps you know, hee a little. If you prefer commentary without that extra sprinkle, go watch The Detail. No, seriously. Go watch The Detail.
Great
year in review videos.
Beautiful
year in review videos. And I thank you. In part 1, we discussed Michael Jackson's tarnished reputation and battles with the media throughout the early 2000s, as well as his steady financial decline that ultimately became the catalyst for the This Is It tour. We touched on Michael's complicated relationship with touring, how it led to his dependency on certain medications and affected his physical health and mental well-being. Finally, we discussed his ever-changing management throughout the final months of his life, and how the entrance of certain figures made it easy for Michael to be, allegedly, manipulated for the greater good of the This Is It tour. Now, it's showtime, darling.
And if he had missed that press conference, it was over. Because no one believed he was going to perform again. Or that I could get him to perform again or anyway.
This is the final curtain call.
I believe that he really wants this. It would shatter him, break his heart if we pulled the plug.
AEG knew Michael Jackson's condition was horrendous.
When is someone going to pay attention?
Can't you see there's something wrong? What are y'all concerned about, the show? There won't be no show if he's not well.
Showtime is defined as the time at which a play, film, or concert is scheduled to start. It's used to signal the beginning of an event or process that is expected to be dramatic, decisive, or otherwise significant. In this video, we'll be discussing the beginning stages of This Is It, from the lead up to Michael signing his AEG agreement, the details of it, and the infamous March 5th press conference, with actual insight from people who were there at the event. So, get your tea brewing, have some extra on standby, and this time, have those towels handy, because we're about to be spilling hunty. He had this look on his face. It was like he was getting himself ready for something he knew was about to happen, something he was dreading. He said, "You weren't here before, Bill, so you haven't seen it yet, but you're going to." "Haven't seen what, sir?" "The Vultures," he said. "They're going to start coming now. Everybody is going to want something, and nobody is going to trust anybody else. You're about to see the ugliness in people. Just wait." At times throughout his life, Michael Jackson was too kind and easily trusting of others. Because of that, he seemed to be a magnet for shady people that never truly had his best interest at heart. To really get into when the Vultures started swarming around him, we have to briefly discuss the years 2007 and 2008.
"I know the creator will go, but his work survives. That is why, to escape death, I attempt to bind my soul to my work."
After Michael was acquitted in June 2005, he would spend the next year and a half traveling with his children and living abroad in places like Bahrain and Ireland. He would not return to the United States until December of 2006. By the spring of 2007, our first vulture of many, Randy Phillips, CEO/president of AEG Live, would solicit Michael about possibly doing a concert residency in London at their newly built O2 Arena.
AEG is a global venue management, sports and entertainment company. We own and operate venues across the world, arenas, stadiums and music theatres. At AEG, we want to give our customers a really great experience, and the O2 is more than just an arena. It's an entertainment destination. There is our entertainment district, which includes bars and restaurants and a multi-screen cinema. We have a retail outlet mall that is essentially something for everyone here at the O2.
This, however, would not be the first time the two had met, as they had briefly been acquainted in the 90s.
To the best of my recollection, my first encounter with Michael was in the mid-90s. Could have been as early as 93, I'm not 100% sure. But in that case, I actually represented him in the negotiations and the fulfillment of a endorsement deal for a product line with a company called LA Gear. But I was a consultant on that deal, reporting to John Branca, who at the time was Michael's attorney.
Did your relationship with Michael Jackson continue?
No, after the LA Gear deal, I had lost touch with Michael. And I wasn't in this job, so I wasn't the promoter. I was a manager at the time. The next time I saw Michael was in a meeting sometime in 2007. One of my executives received a call from an attorney who was representing Michael at the time named Peter Lopez. And they had arranged a meeting in Las Vegas. I assumed the first meeting was going to be to talk about the potential of Michael getting back on the stage again.
According to Mike Smallcombe, per his book, Making Michael, Michael and his entertainment attorney, Peter Lopez, met with Randy Phillips, the CEO of live entertainment promoters and shoots entertainment group AEG Live, in the private wine cellar of a luxury condo in Turnberry Towers that AEG had rented for the occasion. Together, they discussed the possibility of Michael taking up another residency, this time at the 20,000 capacity O2 Arena in London. Michael was at the top of the list, Phillips said. It's a short list. Put it down, Michael. Not this early into the video. Did you notice how I said the possibility of Michael taking up another residency? That's because during this time, MJ was in talks with businessman, photographer, and CEO of CP America, Jack Wishna. The two of them were good friends. Jack was apparently very pivotal in getting MJ to come back to the United States and settle down in Las Vegas.
The singer lived here for a short time in 2007 and was in talks to create an ongoing show on the Las Vegas Strip.
Now, more than just business partners, these two were friends. Jack Wishna is the name behind many Las Vegas headliners and moved Jackson here with the hopes of revitalizing the King of Pop's career. Seeing what's happened since, that move is a decision he now regrets.
There's always the wrong element around Michael, and Michael trusted everybody.
Apparently, MJ liked the idea of doing a residency. I imagine because there would be no travel involved. He would be at a central location and the audience would come to him. Plus, I think we all know how MJ felt about touring.
I don't like to.
This was a phenomenon Randy Phillips would repeatedly refer to as Muhammad coming to the mountain.
When we were opening the O2 Arena in London, I went to him and he was on the top of our list of artists who could do what we call residency shows, where you sit in one city and people come to you.
Right.
It's kind of the Muhammad comes to the mountain strategy.
Right.
Anyway, with Jack Wishna's proposed Vegas residency plan, MJ would have only had to do 3 shows a month, but he also would have been tethered down to Vegas for a couple years, as residencies last a while. However, per MJ's contract with AEG from January 2009, he would have averaged about 2 to 3 shows a week, basically a show every other day it seems. In the long term, I don't see how that would have worked either. Although MJ never did back-to-back shows, having one day for rest in between shows wouldn't have been ideal either, as it took him about that long to recover from one show. But we'll talk about that later in the series.
Naming their project Rock City, Michael would be required to perform just 3 days a month. But once settled into his new home with his children and the comeback collaboration was underway, his behavior turned erratic.
As he stayed in Las Vegas, he started to get debilitated while he was here. And debilitated from a mental health standpoint, debilitated from a physical standpoint. The family started to, bother him again.
Eventually, Wishna came to the decision that the negative publicity surrounding Michael's antics were detrimental to the success of Rock City.
This was probably about June of 2007. And I said, Michael, I think we should shelve it. What I think we should do is put it on a shelf, come back to it when you're, and these were the words that I used, mentally, physically, and vocally capable of being part of this project.
So Jack Wishna decided it wasn't the right time for Michael to try to get back to work, and MJ seemingly straight turned down Randy Phillips.
And at the time, he wasn't ready, and he turned me down.
If only he had stuck to that. Once 2008 hit, however, Michael would realize that he had to go back to work. There was no other option.
As you look back on your career, Michael, what would you have done differently?
Still looking forward to doing a lot of great things, so that's hard. I think the best is yet to come, in my true humble opinion.
By the end of 2007 into early 2008, Michael Jackson's Neverland Ranch was in danger of going into foreclosure and being sold off at auction. You know, because MJ wasn't paying the $23 million loan he took out against it back in 2006 due to, well, hit it, girl.
Insufficient funds, you ain't got no money. Woo.
We briefly touched on this back in part 1 as this marked the entrance of Dr. Tomei Tomei, MJ's manager. Let's get into the full tea of it all, shall we? So Michael hadn't lived in Neverland since the police raided it during the trial era. He stated he would never live there again and that it was a house, but no longer a home. Then he proceeded to hee into the wind for over a year living outside of the United States. The California State Labor Commission shut the property down in 2006 and banned any events from taking place there. They also forced MJ to pay a bunch of money in fines and wages for his employees who did not receive pay for 3 months. After he finished screaming, crying, and violently throwing up, he had to figure out how he was going to save Neverland. That's when Jermaine Jackson put Michael in touch with Dr. Tomei Tomei, who would then contact a man by the name of Tom Barrick, the owner of real estate investment firm Colony Capital.
Colony is a private equity firm that has specialized in hard assets. And for those of you who don't know what private equity, it's a business that used to be in vogue until your president came into effect.
Oh, brother. Basically, private equity in a nutshell is a form of financing in which a firm invests money in a business in exchange for an equity or ownership stake. So Colony Capital helped MJ by paying the debt on Neverland, and then bippity-boppity, Neverland became their property. MJ supposedly still owned a small stake in it, but it was primarily Colony Capital's. Okay, go on.
And it is quickly depleting in prestige, but we own lots of companies and lots of stuff, and the idea is to add value to them over a 3 to 5 year period and produce what used to be historically high returns, someplace in excess of 25%.
So, that was Tom Barrick. And yes, I do mean this Tom Barrick. To quote a 2010 article from New York Mag titled How Tom Barrick and Rob Lowe Are Making Money Off of Distressed Celebrities, Barrick's turn into entertainment investing began with a visit to Michael Jackson's home in Las Vegas in 2008. Barrick had received a call from Tomei Tomei, a fellow Lebanese American who had become Jackson's business manager. Jackson was facing a crisis, Tomei said. The holder of $270 million in loans to Jackson was foreclosing on Neverland and planned to sell it in 5 days. Would Barrick meet with Jackson? It's so not Tom's thing, Rob Lowe says. Getting roped into spending half an hour with Michael Jackson in some weird house is just not on his agenda. So not his thing, huh? If that's the case, why would he be interested in helping Michael Jackson at all? Plus, that's not how you made it seem here, bestie.
We had the good fortune of meeting Michael and starting down a path of restructuring his financial empire. And just on a personal level, I have to tell you, he was one of the most amazingly kind, human, compassionate, gentle, and incredible genius souls that I've ever met. And as part of a complicated restructuring, we started to take diagnostically the pieces of aggravation from his financial portfolio, and there were several pieces: Neverland, the Sony ATV portfolio, and what they call the MyJack portfolio. And we started with Neverland.
As soon as Michael Jackson died, all you tricks wanted to switch up. I hate it here. I mean, if we're being honest, Neverland was a bit run down since Michael at this point, in approximately March of 2008, hadn't lived there in 3 years. The upkeep on the property hadn't really been maintained, and it would seem like the property was more trouble than it was worth. So what made Barrick change his mind? To again quote the article from New York Mag, somewhat grudgingly, Barrick arrived at Jackson's 50s stucco rental on Palomino Lane. The 1,000 plus Sony ATV catalog was on the table between them, and Barrick was quickly won over.
What do you mean by that?
For sure, the guy is an absolute genius, Barrick says. He was remembering not just songs, but every performance, every date, every script. When it came to business matters, though, Jackson was lost. He knew only that if Neverland was foreclosed on as scheduled, it would trigger a cascade of financial devastation. For the past decade, he had repeatedly staved off financial reckoning by borrowing. Now, he was out of options. Okay, the math is kind of mathing. The way this article is worded, it makes it seem like Mr. Barrick was only in this for that sweet, sweet Sony ATV catalog. This in turn would lead to discussions of MJ getting back to work. If Barrick could get MJ to start working again, it would not only provide Michael Jackson with the cash flow he needed, but it would, if done correctly, rehabilitate his image, therefore increasing his marketability and the value of his assets. After refurbishing Neverland, Tom had plans to potentially sell the property for as high as $60 million. Barrick built his fortune making deals, and in some ways, Neverland began as just another one, a contrarian bet on a troubled asset, an operating business backed by real estate. But in this case, the operating business was a person.
What do you mean by that?
Colony would bail Jackson out of his substantial debt. In return, the firm would assume ownership of Neverland, and Jackson, after a 13-year hiatus, would go back to work to generate new revenue. According to Jermaine Jackson, per his book, You Are Not Alone, Michael Through a Brother's Eyes, it was at a dinner Michael shared with Tom Barrick that the seed for This Is It was planted, sometime around March/April 2008, when all the refinancing talk was going on. It became clear to everyone, including my brother, there was only one way to earn the big money that would secure his future: to go back on tour. Michael knew the realities. As he would later tell his makeup artist Karen Faye, he'd have ended up working at McDonald's otherwise. I told him, where you are is an insolvable puzzle, unless you're willing to go back to work. If you're willing to do that, then we can help. But if you're not willing to do that, it's just presiding over a funeral. At first, Jackson demurred. He really had a hard time with that, and he struggled for about 3 days. Finally, he calls back and says, "You're right. I'll do it." Michael, reluctantly, decided it was time to start working again, and days before Neverland was to go up for auction in May of 2008, Colony Capital announced that Tom Barrick had personally written a check for $22.5 million to save Neverland, as part of a deal the company had made with Michael Jackson. Under the terms of the agreement, Colony and Barrick agreed to defer Jackson's loan payments for more money later, and to finance the refurbishment of the ranch with an eye towards selling it at a substantial profit. A statement from Michael would be released following the deal. It reads, "I am pleased with recent developments involving Neverland Ranch, and I am in discussions with Colony and Tom Barrick with regard to the ranch and other matters that would allow me to focus on the future." The following month, in June of 2008, Tomei would become MJ's official manager and spokesperson. This would mark the beginning of Tomei, in his words, building a fence around Michael to keep people out, as well as firing members of MJ's staff to maximize profit and minimize spending. By the fall of 2008, MJ moved back to Los Angeles, as Tomei advised him that LA was where all the action was happening for this kind of business. He would take up temporary residence at the Hotel Bel Air. With all of the Vultures in agreement that MJ needed to go back to work, a number of deals would be presented to him. Tom Barrick proposed a Vegas residency at the Las Vegas Hilton, the same hotel Elvis staged his 1969 comeback, which Colony Capital owned, where MJ would headline and do up to 180 shows a year with the possibility of earning tens of millions of dollars. There was also an idea for an extravaganza that would include his brothers 20 or 30 times a year. That would make him at least $10 million. Michael wasn't interested in either one of those ideas. Tomei had been scoping out a few opportunities as well. Apparently a shoe deal with Nike, a Broadway show, a video game through Sony, and even a thriller TV series were on the table. There was even an opportunity for MJ to work with the #1 concert promoter in the world, Live Nation, which I'm sure had Randy Phillips somewhere screaming, crying, and violently throwing up! You know, since AEG is the second largest concert promoter. According to Tomei's court transcript from the 2017 United States tax court trial, the MJ Estate versus the Internal Revenue Service, after he moved to Los Angeles, Peter Lopez came to me and he said, "You know, we were discussing with Michael at that time that he should go back to work, and he decided that he'll go back to work on the condition that the first performance would be in England." I believe Michael wanted the first show to be in London because of all the love his fans over there always showed him, and also because MJ wasn't too keen on touring in the United States, given everything that happened during the trial era. So Peter Lopez came to me and said, you know, Live Nation is very interested in having a contract with Michael Jackson for a tour. So I told Michael, and he said, go see what they have to say. So I went with Peter to Live Nation, and we had a meeting, and it didn't work out because Michael was demanding some advance cash, demanding he wants a house, he wants this, he wants that. So we didn't get that deal. So I went back and I reported to Michael, and Michael told me, no, I don't want to work with them. Then Peter came back and said, how about AEG? I told Michael, and Michael is very familiar with AEG and Randy Phillips. So he said, go talk to them. This would be when everyone's favorite CEO of AEG Live, Randy Phillips, would come back into the picture. After AEG was suggested, Tom Barrick would place a call to Phil Anschutz, the owner of AEG. What really moved things along was a phone conversation between a pair of billionaires, Barrick and Anschutz. Barrick told Anschutz how impressed he'd been when he met Michael Jackson in person. Anschutz pointed out that if Michael Jackson's public stature was elevated and his career reinvigorated, the value of Neverland Ranch could easily double. Beyond that, a series of shows at AEG's O2 could easily lead to some sort of resident performer agreement in Las Vegas that might be staged at one of Colony Capital's hotels or casinos. Immediately after Anschutz got off the phone with Barrick, he called Randy Phillips and asked him to meet with the Colony Capital CEO to talk about what it would take to secure a commitment from Michael Jackson to perform a series of concerts at the O2 in London.
After the conversation, after the boss called you, what did you do?
I I had my office set up an appointment for me to go and meet with Mr. Barrick and some of his other partner, a fellow named Richard Nanula, at Colony Capital.
Oh wow, Richard Nanula? You surely can't mean this Richard Nanula.
I believe it was, to the best of my recollection, a gentleman named Richard Nanula, who was a partner in Colony Capital, pretty much led the meeting and explained to me that that Colony Capital had purchased the note on Neverland, Michael's ranch in North Santa Barbara County.
Was there conversation about a concert during this meeting?
Yes.
This would lead to another meeting, but this time between Dr. Tomei and Randy.
They set a meeting up for me with a gentleman named Dr. Tomei, who was presented to me as Michael Jackson's manager. Michael Jackson wanted to restart his career, the primary part of it being touring live, but he was also going to put out new music during the course of the tour.
According to Randy, he and Tomei had met about 2 or 3 times prior to having a meeting with Michael. At these meetings, a plan for Michael to return to the stage was unraveled. First, Randy wanted to start the tour in London so MJ's image could be rehabilitated prior to eventually touring in the United States. He felt with everything that had transpired with the 05 trial and the 93 allegations, it would be too much for him to start the tour in the US and achieve what he wanted to achieve. Financially, it would also be in AEG's best interest with them owning the O2 Arena. Second, after London, he would work his way through Europe, the Far East, Australia, and New Zealand over the course of 2.5 years. After that, he would come back to the United States and do a multiple-night arena tour. An arena is a bit smaller than a stadium. 20,000 seats versus 60,000. I assume that Tomei was relaying all of this information back to Michael. Along with Randy's London tour plans, AEG was willing to give MJ everything he wanted. A cash advance, a home for him and his children, a down payment for the home he wanted to move into after the concerts ended he dubbed Wonderland, and even a movie deal. Randy Phillips stated during the MJ Estate versus IRS tax trial that he agreed to $1 million fund to hire writers to put a script together, something MJ could then shop around to a studio. I believe AEG was also going to finance a 3D version of Thriller that he would star in. Subsequently, this would lead to a meeting between all of the AEG executives, Michael Jackson, and his representatives. According to an article by The Hollywood Reporter, even before AEG executives met with Jackson in September 2008, they had their doubts about the superstar and were seeking insurance to cover any potential losses if the shows fell through. Sean Trell, AEG Live's general counsel, confirms this during his 2013 AEG trial testimony, stating that he first reached out to insurance broker Bob Taylor in November 2008 in connection with cancellation insurance.
No, it was a huge risk, and everybody warned me against doing it, okay, and that, ultimately he would break my heart. It wouldn't happen. I heard everything. They ran the full gamut. And you know what? In life, you have a very few opportunities in a career to touch greatness, and I've said this before. And they asked me if I would do this again, given everything that has happened. And the answer is hell yes.
We discussed back in part 1 that MJ had developed a reputation of canceled performances and burned bridges with a lot of his investors. Even with that in mind, before even having a meeting with Michael Jackson and finishing the negotiations is a little insane. I understand wanting to cover your own ass, but this feels a bit slimy. Before this big meeting with MJ happened, Paul Gongaware, co-CEO of AEG Live/Concerts West, would send an email to his colleagues detailing a strategy for the first meeting. He would advise his colleagues to wear casual clothing because MJ is distrustful of people in suits. And he would also tell them to talk fluff with Mikey, only discuss the net gross profit of a potential world tour and not the gross profit.
Net to Mikey, $132 million. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. And do you know the difference between net and gross?
Sure.
What's the difference?
Gross is gross revenues. Net is what's left after all the expenses are paid.
So gross is the top line number that comes in, and then net is what's left after stuff is paid out, right?
Yes.
Okay. His net share works out to be 50% after local, venue, and advertising costs, which is quite good. His gross will approach $500 million. Maybe gross is a better number to throw around if we need to use numbers with Mikey listening. Did I read that correctly?
Yeah.
So in this email in 2008, were you making a plan with Randy Phillips and Tim Lewicki and John Meglin, at least on a CC basis, to fool Michael into thinking he was going to make more money than he really was on the tour?
I don't know. I don't recall writing this email.
Wow, that was annoying. Homegirl's got a point though. Unfortunately, this won't be the last of Mr. Gongaware or his lies. As a matter of fact, Paul Gongaware is someone MJ had worked with on both the Dangerous and History tours. We'll talk more about him throughout the series. Just know, all my homies hate Paul Gongaware. Why was MJ always getting ganked by someone named Paul? And if you didn't clock that shade, don't waste your time.
And what was that, if you recall? Your concept, your ideas, as of September 2008.
A plan to present to Michael in terms of starting his touring career again was to actually start in London at the O2 and do what we call a residency show at the O2. It was internally, we called it the Mountain Coming to Muhammad, meaning instead of an artist touring with 20 trucks and all the expense of that, get fixed into one venue and then advertise it around the world. Now, obviously, it takes a very special artist to be able to do that with. And that was the first phase of what could have been a multi-year touring plan.
And this had been discussed with Dr. Tomei?
Yes, it had.
Okay. Did it appear to you that Michael Jackson, your particular perception, that he was receptive to the idea?
Very.
Okay. And at this point in your conversations with him, did you feel like that he was ready to do this tour, ready to do these concerts?
Well, it's hard to answer your question when you say feel. It was apparent from his discussions with me that he was motivated and energized and receptive to the idea.
I don't particularly like the way that Randy answered that question. Nonetheless, I believe that there was one side of MJ that was excited, motivated, and receptive to touring and the ideas AEG had, especially when it came to the creative and film aspects. But I also believe there was another side that was apprehensive and didn't want to have to go back on tour because of the physical and mental toll it had on him, and also the fear of having to face the general public again after so long. But at this point, he didn't have any more options, so negotiations would continue, and on Halloween 2008, a very emotional meeting would take place.
Well, let's go to October, Halloween 2008. Do you recall a meeting that you had there with Michael Jackson and Dr. Tomei?
Yes. Michael was expressing to me one of the reasons he had decided to restart his career. The primary reason was that he wanted to finally settle down and get a really, really good home for the kids and for his family. So they weren't, in his words, living like vagabonds.
Was he emotional when he discussed this?
It got emotional, yes.
All right. When did it get emotional?
When he was just describing how they had lived, he and the three kids, and that he just really wanted to settle down. He was tired of living like that, and it was emotional, and I cried. So,
did he cry?
Yes.
According to Randy's testimony during the 2017 MJ Estate versus IRS tax trial, MJ had broken down and was crying into his arms. He and Tomei were both crying because it pained them to see Michael Jackson, the superstar, in that condition. As you'll learn, Randy loves to exaggerate things, but perhaps this is the one time I believe he was telling the truth. MJ just wanted to be able to adequately provide for his children, something pretty much every parent wants to do. With this being the motivating factor of him wanting to do all of this, it truly makes me sick to think of all the things he went through in the following months at the hands of these men after a moment like this. By Christmas 2008, MJ and his children would be moved into a rental property on 100 North Carrollwood Drive in Holmby Hills, California. In January 2009, he would be signing the contract that would jumpstart the rehabilitation of his career, and unbeknownst to him, living the final 6 months of his life. That's why he decided to do this concert. He thought if he could make enough money over there, he could get out with his kids, and the nightmare of all the vultures and the lawsuits and the drama would finally end. But it wasn't really going to end. As long as he was Michael Jackson, it was never going to end.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year!
Prince said his father would cry after phone calls, saying, quote, "They're going to kill me. They're going to kill me."
Welcome to Act 1 of our series. An act is part of a play defined by elements such as rising action, climax, and resolution. Please take your seats, silence your cell phones, and make sure all teacups are piping hot and filled to the brim, darling. In this act, we will be focusing on the first quarter of 2009, January, February, and March, so let's spill. Our tale officially begins in January of 2009. At the end of this month, MJ would sign his agreement with AEG. But before we get to that, let's discuss a bit of what was going on earlier in the month. Something AEG was promptly trying to take care of was their need for Michael Jackson to get a physical exam by an approved doctor so they could secure cancellation insurance. The cancellation insurance debacle is nothing new. It's something that would continue for the remainder of Michael's life and thereafter. So we'll discuss it as it comes up. In reference to trying to find a physician, insurance broker Bob Taylor would reach out to AEG Live's general counsel. Basically a really fancy title for someone that provides in-house legal advice for a company. Sean Trell. And if you ask my homies, they all hate him. On January 7th, 2009, Bob would send the following email. Prior to speaking with carriers, we ask the artist to attend medical with a doctor, a full medical with both blood/urine tests. The doctor also wants to review the medical records over the last 5 years to ensure full disclosure. Insurers require further medical examination to be carried out by their nominated doctor. They may restrict illness cover or death from illness cover until this examination has taken place. 2 days later, on January 9th, Sean replied, "Bob, is it really necessary to incur $10K in expense to get this medical exam completed? I mean, we are in Los Angeles. Clearly there are reputable, if not world-renowned physicians here that have been used before for these purposes. Please advise." Bob replies, "Yes, there are people in LA, but I do not want the insurers to have any doubt as to the medical info provided. I feel that Slavit is key to this as the insurers really do trust him at the moment. If the cost is a problem, I have already indicated that I would expect insurers to contribute, as would RTIB. I do not want to miss miss the window, as if we get it wrong, then the whole possibility of getting insurance could well be prejudiced. MJ is being badly mauled by the press here on the subject of his health, and we have to refute that info, which will not be easy. I believe that Slavitt is the correct man to do that. I'm happy to try another LA-based doctor, but we both have to recognize the possible cost of that. If you decide on an LA man, then Lai must be an independent with no past history with MJ. That in itself will not be easy. Let me know what you want to do, and if it's not Slavitt, I will try to source someone in LA. January 10th, Sean simply says, "Got it. Please proceed." Okay, but like, why does any of this matter? Well, if we break this down for the girls in the balcony, AEG was scared, shook, panicking, because all of this bad press about Michael Jackson kept coming out in regards to his health. Most of it was coming from an unauthorized biographer by the name of Ian Halperman. And I just know his muscles was sore from all the reaching he was doing with those rumors. Everything from MJ needing a lung transplant, from him having chronic gastrointestinal bleeding, going blind in his left eye, and having skin cancer.
How's Michael feeling with the skin cancer? Is he okay?
He's had skin cancer.
Well, that's the report he had.
On January 6, 2009, the National Enquirer even reported that Michael Jackson only had 6 months to live. Coincidentally, they were kinda right about that one. Nonetheless, AEG had to make sure this medical examination was solid, and they had to find the right physician to do it, no matter the cost. Was this because they suspected there was validity to the claims Michael was in poor health? At this point, I don't believe that's the case, or that MJ was in poor health. What you'll learn about AEG is it was never about Michael Jackson. It was about the money Michael Jackson could bring in. A healthy MJ to them was much more profitable, and of course easier to insure, but we'll talk about the medical examination and insurance in February. For now, let's skip ahead a couple weeks towards the end of January. On January 22nd, 2009, Kathy Jory, an outside attorney that has worked with AEG in the past, sent a very telling email to Randy Phillips, Paul Gongaware, John Meglin, CEO of Concerts West, and Sean Trell in regards to Dr. Tomei. While I understand you've checked up on the credentials and authenticity of Dr. Tomei through personal sources, I nonetheless have reservations about whether or not he is the real McCoy. When I checked a couple online search engines for Dr. Tomei to see if I could find reference to him, the only thing I found were a few recent quotes from Dr. Tomei as Michael Jackson's publicist and some references to him in various blogs by people who referred to him as a mystery man who claims to represent Jackson. I found nothing else on him, almost like he never existed until he met Michael Jackson. It's possible there are references to him on the internet in Arabic rather than English, which I didn't check because I don't read Arabic. Nonetheless, I recommend that a background check be performed through a private investigator and/or at minimum that someone at AEG Live meet with Michael Jackson to make sure he understands that we are entering into a tour agreement with him that will require him to perform a worldwide tour. First of all, stop the cap, as the kids say. We all know AEG doesn't conduct background checks, am I right? Unfortunately, I am. Second, despite Kathy Jory's own reservations about Dr. Tomei, she believed him when he said he was the sole officer of the company used to handle MJ's business affairs, the Michael Jackson Company, LLC, despite a January 14th email that Dennis Hawk, one of MJ's lawyers, had sent to her stating, Michael is the sole officer and will be the signatory to the contract on behalf of the entity. Now, why this is relevant is because with Tomei as the sole officer, this meant that he had control to act on behalf of Michael's business. This means he was the direct point of contact to get to Michael, and he was responsible for all notices, approvals, and consents in regards to MJ's obligations with AEG. This man had the full authority to sign checks and other various documents, and Michael Jackson may not have been aware, which further proves what MJ said in September 2008 to his spiritual advisor, June Gatlin, to be true.
She just has ways about him that looks like see what he's done. There's a divide between me and my representatives, and I don't talk to my lawyer, my accountant. I talk to him, and he talks to them. That's not good. I know it's not good. I don't like it, and I want to get somebody in there with him that I know and trust. I don't know what's in my accounts. I don't know. Oh, that's not good, Michael. I know that's not good.
But if that's the case, if MJ was so shooketh and didn't like how he didn't know what in the frick frack diddly dack was going on behind his back, why would he sign a tour agreement with him? Well, I can only speculate. MJ did sign a power of attorney giving Tomei the authority to do these things.
He had pretty much complete control.
In what way?
He had checking accounts. He was having money put into the accounts. He was signing checks.
He was signing checks for Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
And Michael allowed that?
He gave him the power to do it.
And despite it being alleged he didn't have a lawyer present when signing it, he still did it.
Why you booing me? I'm right.
There's also the fact that AEG was king of something called an oral agreement. We'll dive into this a little later. This is basically when a contract is created by two or more parties through spoken communication, as opposed to written. Oral contracts can be legally binding, despite them being difficult to prove in a court of law. I believe negotiations for MJ's AEG deal were done early on, and it was just about getting everything formally drafted into a written and signed agreement in January 2009, which means MJ would have already agreed to the terms verbally, therefore he couldn't back out, and was stuck with Tomei. I mean, it was alleged during the 2013 Jackson vs. AEG trial that there was an oral contract between AEG and Dr. Conrad Murray. Murray would be working on good faith until a contract could be drafted and then signed by himself and Michael Jackson, which it never was. But let's not talk about Murray's AEG contract. I'd rather talk about Michael's. Now, I'm not going to be going over the entirety of the contract because amongst my list of things I don't have time for, that is one of them. What I am going to do is go over a few main points, those points being the number of shows MJ agreed to, the exact deal MJ had with AEG, which is known as a 90-10 deal, and the promissory note MJ signed. Before we begin, first, I'm not a legal professional. I do not know anything about contracts, touring agreements, or, well, the law. A lot of this contract jargon, honestly, makes my head hurt. I've tried my best to understand and explain this stuff in a way that is clear and concise for other people to consume. If I'm wrong, don't come for me, because I certainly didn't send for you. This has been a Shady PSA. Second, I'd like to give a special thanks to the lovely Charlies, Charlie Carter from TheMJCast, and British Investigative Journalist Charles Thomson for lending their voices to this series. I had the opportunity to interview the two of them back in September of 2023 with whatever This Is It questions my little heart desired, and just like a woman in labor, they delivered.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Both of them were also present at the March 5th press conference, where MJ announced the This Is It tour. But we'll get into that later. Also, special thanks to Jermaine Bull of the MJCast as well for making this even remotely possible. Stream the MJCast, bestie, and get ready to buckle the fuckle up. The signing of Michael Jackson's AEG agreement took place on January 28, 2009. Although the agreement is dated January 26th, it was not signed until the 28th. Presumably, a few hours before the signing was to take place at Michael's home on Carrollwood, Paul Gongaware would send an email to Randy Phillips to confirm it was still happening. MJ still on today, right? Randy replied and CC'd in Sean Trell. Yes, 5 p.m., 100 Carrollwood Drive. You and Sean should be there. Sean then forwarded this email to Ted Fiker, AEG's chief legal officer. Another fancy title for a glorified attorney. Ted, not even 3 minutes later, replied with, FYI, does this mean you get to meet the freak? Sean replied, apparently. Not sure how I feel about that. Interesting for sure, but kind of creepy. Not only do all my homies hate Sean Trell, they hate Ted Fiker too. Get him, Michael! It's late enough into the video for this, right? Nah, oh well. Spin the block while you at it. This email alone tells you everything you need to know about how AEG really viewed Michael. Brian Panish, the Jacksons' attorney during the 2013 AEG trial, summarizes it perfectly when he says, this exemplifies that AEG had no respect for Mr. Jackson. All he was to them was a vehicle to make money, and a vehicle perhaps to get to that #1 concert promoter in the world slot Live Nation was holding so dear, huh, Randy? Later that day, on the 28th of January, in the living room of Michael's home, everyone met to get the agreement signed. On AEG's side, Paul Gongaware, Sean Trell, and Randy Phillips were all present. On Michael's side, he and his attorneys, Dennis Hawk and Peter Lopez, were there, along with Dr. Tomei. According to Randy Phillips, it was a celebratory meeting, and someone had even brought champagne. I mean, of course it was a celebratory meeting, because bippity boppity Michael Jackson became your property. In total, it lasted about an hour and ended with Michael giving Randy a hug for the first time. Trell recalled there being a real positive energy and a good vibe in the room. MJ was said to be very excited about the prospect of returning to work and was very keen on the 3D stuff, I assume for the 3D version of Thriller. Paul pointed out how engaged, alert, and attentive MJ was as he took the time to read the entire contract before signing it. Even with MJ's signature on the contract, it was still an uphill battle for AEG. Now, let's discuss the number of shows.
Because there is a report out that, by unnamed sources, that he didn't want to do 50 shows.
Michael Jackson told me himself when he hired me that he never wanted to do 50 shows, he only agreed to do 10.
That is absolutely not true.
It definitely seemed like 10, and we were, I think 10 was announced, and we were under the impression that it was 10. It was until later that we heard that it was 30.
Because originally when we were doing this, we were going to do 30 shows in London. We didn't know how big it was going to be, nor did he.
The contract Michael signed was for 31 concerts with the option to add more.
Michael told me this himself, and he only agreed to 10 shows.
Did Michael want to do 50 concerts?
Absolutely not.
Then why did he?
Michael wanted to do 10 shows, and these people came into his life. They came and says, no, you have to do more, you have to do this. They booked them without Michael even knowing.
And I had to call him yesterday and say, Mike, we may have to add 20 more shows, and we're still not going to come close to fulfilling the demand. I mean, if he really wanted to, he could spend 2 years here and turn that arena into a club. But he said that long, he said, oh my God.
You just heard several different numbers being thrown out. 10, 31, and 50. For right now, let's focus on 10. Was Michael Jackson ever going to be doing only 10 shows? Well, let's start by taking a look at Michael's AEG agreement. In it, you'll see the terms artist, artist co, and promoter. The artist refers to Michael Jackson himself. The artist co refers to the artist's company, the Michael Jackson Company. MJ's company he used to handle his business affairs. Now, because Dr. Tomei runs this company, whenever you see artist co, that pretty much means Tomei. The promoter, of course, represents AEG Live. If we look in section 3 under the itinerary of shows, it reads, artist co and promoter shall reasonably cooperate with each other in an effort to arrive at mutually approved itineraries for each leg of shows during the term. Provided, however, it shall be unreasonable for Artist Co. to withhold or qualify its approval of any itinerary or amended itinerary proposed by promoter if the date range of such itinerary does not exceed 10 weeks, the frequency of shows within such itinerary does not exceed 1 show per day, and 3.5 shows per 7-day period on average. Artist Co. hereby pre-approves up to 31 shows or such other greater number as agreed by Artist Co. and promoter at the O2 Arena in London, England between July 26th and September 30th, 2009. In no event shall the number of shows performed by artist in the first leg of the tour be less than 18 shows unless otherwise directed by promoter. It shall be unreasonable for Artist Co. to withhold its approval of adding shows to any given leg of the tour or adding legs of shows to the tour during the term, so long as the number of shows in any given leg do not exceed 1 per day and 3.5 per 7-day period on average. Okay, now let me break that down for the people in the back. You know I got you. Basically, Dr. Tomei and AEG would be working together to make sure things were good as far as the show schedule and adding more shows to the term, meaning the execution date of the contract to the end date, which is stated as December 31st, 2011 in this agreement. If AEG wanted to increase or decrease the number of shows, they had the right to do so, presumably with MJ's approval, as long as they did not exceed 1 show per day and 3.5 shows per 7-day period. And I know what you're thinking. 3.5 shows? That math isn't mathing. Well, 3.5 is simply an average, and obviously MJ wouldn't be stopped halfway through a show. It's just some weeks he would be doing 2 shows and others he would be doing 3.
Randy, was 50 shows too many for Michael to be expected to do?
He was going to average 2.25 shows a week. So no, the truth is, Chris, if that was too many, then 1 would have been too many.
Wait, What does 2 1/4 shows mean? That's 2.25. That's not what the contract says. Anything to seem like y'all weren't going to be overworking Michael, right? Because per the emails from Bob Taylor, MJ would definitely at some point be doing back-to-back shows, which he typically evaded at all costs. I mean, on the weeks he would have been doing 3 shows, that's a show every other day at best. With it being structured that way, it wouldn't leave him time to get adequate rest between shows, solely due to the nature of how MJ performed. I mean, my mans, he put it out like no other.
You have to understand his adrenaline was so intense. Sometimes it would take him 2 days.
2 days to go to sleep.
For his adrenaline just to come down from one show.
Anyway, per this agreement, up to 31 shows were pre-approved. With the words up to being used, it seems like this number was always subject to change, and it was subject to change at the jurisdiction seemingly of Tomei and AEG, since the contract states it's unreasonable for the Artist Co. to withhold its approval of adding shows to any given leg of the tour, and that the Artist Co. and promoter shall reasonably cooperate with each other in an effort to arrive at mutually approved itineraries. Pretty much the only stipulation set in place was that they could not go past 1 show per day and 3.5 shows per 7-day period on average. Interesting. We should also note that Michael could not perform less than 18 shows in the first leg of the tour unless directed to by AEG. Now, 18 shows is an oddly specific number, but if we do a little math and calculate the number of weeks between the dates given in the contract, July 26th and September 30th, 2009, you get 9 weeks and 3 days. If you take the 9 weeks and divide it by 18 shows, you get 2, which correlates to the least amount of shows Michael could do per week. But hold on, because where did July 26th come from? I mean, the tour was originally supposed to start on July 8th, before it was pushed up to July 13th.
That's suspicious. That's weird.
With that being said, if MJ couldn't do less than 18 shows in the first leg, again, where did we get 10?
The concert contract says 31 with the option to add more. And I think what they did was they announced 10, probably wondering the same as everyone was wondering after what's happened after the trial. Are people going to want to go and see him? Are people going to feel comfortable going and seeing him? Have we pitched the tickets too expensive, for example? So I think they announced 10 to gauge the demand.
And that's a quite good sales tactic, really, in that, you know, you only announce a limited number of shows, so the people, if you really want to come and see him, you've got to register and you've got to come in now. Oh, what? There's demand for extra shows? Okay, well, here's the extra shows so that you guys can actually get your tickets. So there was a little bit of propaganda in that as well.
Initially, we put 10 shows on sale, or we advertised 10 shows, was the initial run. You would never, as a promoter, put all of your shows on sale at the same time because it becomes a disincentive for early purchase.
So, the 10 shows are what you would refer to as the pre-sale, meaning 10 of the 31 shows MJ initially agreed to were put out prior to the other 21 shows, which would be for the general public on sale. This would allow AEG to gauge the demand and give buyers a sense of urgency to purchase tickets, since it was assumed MJ would only be doing 10 shows. As Paul Gongaware stated during the 2013 AEG trial, we only wanted to set out 10, in case there were only 10 there. It would look like it was sold out and successful. So we started with the 10 and then worked into it. As far as MJ stating on several occasions that he was only doing 10 shows, I can only speculate and assume it stems from the tour being split into phases, as Randy said.
My recollection at the time was to actually start in London at the O2 and do what we call a residency show. And that was the first phase of what could have been a multi-year touring plan.
So you were thinking in terms of phases at that time?
That's correct.
And that was going to be the beginning of a 3-year world tour. And what I was going to do is work around the world and then bring them, like Japan, Australia, and then bring them back here after the second year and use that time to rehabilitate him here because of the trial in Santa Barbara you know, the things that he was accused of and stuff like that. It was somewhat, his image was damaged here. So we had to do that. I was going to do it. The Grammys, I made a deal with Ken Ehrlich, the producer of the Grammys, to do this incredible, like 25-minute Michael Jackson repertoire special on that broadcast, which would have been amazing.
After the March 5th press conference, once AEG saw the insane demand for tickets, the other 21 shows would be put on sale, with the increase to 50 happening a few weeks after that. With the tour being split into phases, perhaps MJ thought the 31 shows would be split into phases of 10, with breaks in between. But then
they just kept adding and adding. What happened was this kind of folklore emerged that Michael had signed up for 10. I believe what happened was it went up from 10 to 31, and then at some point later than that they added even more. He signed the contract, he agreed to do it, he was sold on the idea of, oh, this is going to be great, I'll beat Prince's record, I'll be back to the king of pop. And then the nearer the concerts got and the more the reality of the enormity of what he'd signed up for began to emerge, and the more he worried and fretted about what kind of public reaction he was going to get, whether he was up to it, etc. He started looking for ways out.
Wait, what does this have to do with that man that was playing the bass in front of MJ's face?
Make a long story short, Prince is performing, walks off the stage, through the crowd with the bass, people screaming and pulling and tugging on him, playing the bass through the crowd, makes his way over to where me, Chris Tucker, and Michael Jackson was sitting, and rips the bass in half. Just like ripping the most killerest solo in the world. And so after the show, I had breakfast at Michael Jackson's house, knocked on the door, he opens the door. First thing he says was, "Why was Prince playing the bass in my face?"
Let's talk about the number 31. So as we saw in MJ's contract, the original agreement was for 31 shows, but for someone that only wanted to do 10, why would he sign an agreement for 31?
This contract, it provided for how many shows, Mr. Phillips?
31.
31. Is there any significance to the 31?
Yes.
Okay. What is that significance?
Michael wanted to do 10 more than Prince did.
It appeared to you that he understood the significance of that?
He came up with the number, yes.
All right. And you, of course, agreed?
Yes.
All right.
In 2007, Prince did a concert residency at the O2 Arena called the Earth Tour, 21 Nights in London. It, to this day, remains the longest residency to have been held at the venue. So basically, MJ wanted to be a little... well, he wanted to be a little...
P-E to the T-T-Y. P-E to the T-T-Y. P-E to the T-T-Y.
Anyway, this is reaffirmed by Randy during the 2013 AEG trial. He stated, he came up with the number. We didn't. Prince prior to this had done a residency at the O2 and was very heralded. It was 21 shows and no one had done that many shows in an arena in one city before. And Michael and Prince were incredibly competitive and he wanted to beat Prince's record by enough that Prince could never beat it again, you know? So he would be in the Guinness Book of World Records and that kind of thing. We all know how much MJ loved breaking records, being an innovator, a pioneer, the blueprint, the dick print. So this kind of thing seems on par for him.
It became clear that 31 shows were not going to be enough?
Yes, it was obvious that we would have blown through the sales on 31 shows in what we call the pre-sale and not have had any tickets left for the general public on sale.
All right, so what did you do in response to that? Or what did you or Paul Gongaware do?
Paul called me. Said in his inimitable fashion, "Dude, can you call Dr. Tomei and see if Michael will agree to do more shows because this is an unprecedented demand."
All right, and was that done?
Yes, I called Dr. Tomei.
All right. Did Michael Jackson eventually agree to do more shows?
Right, said almost simultaneous with my conversations with Dr. Tomei, I also spoke to Michael.
Just like that?
Within 20 minutes.
All right. But Michael Jackson had some requests to do more shows, right?
That is correct.
We'll talk about MJ's requests to up the shows to 50 in a second. According to Bill Whitfield, one of MJ's security guards during his final years, the number 50 spans farther back than we may think. To quote Remember the Time, protecting Michael Jackson in his final days, he states, "It was 50 before it was 10. 50 was the original number, because that was how many shows he really needed to do to make this big money they were waving in his face." Back when all these concert discussions were in the beginning stages, he'd talk to us about it in the car. He'd say, "They want me to do 50 shows. I can't do 50 shows." He didn't say it like he was refusing to do it. He said it like it was ridiculous they were even asking him to do it. Like they were asking him to jump off of a 15-story building and survive. It seemed like a bait and switch. It was originally 50 shows, and then it was lowered to 10 to entice him to do it. Then they raised it back to 50 again. I heard they got Mr. Jackson to commit to it by saying he'd break the record for the number of shows sold out by Prince. Because Mr. Jackson was always competitive about being compared to Prince. That was one story that was going around. But the reality was that Mr. Jackson was already in debt to AEG for so much money. He'd taken this multi-million-dollar advance on the shows, plus AEG was paying for that mansion in LA. So when they told him it was 50 shows, it wasn't like he could pay back what he'd already taken. He was boxed in. He didn't have a whole lot of options. A bait and switch, as Bill Whitfield stated, does seem likely. Michael was not going to initially agree to 50 shows. I feel like he barely wanted to do 10. The man realistically just wanted to focus on creating films. With AEG essentially funding the lifestyle of him and his children, I don't believe he could ever disagree with the show increases. But did he even get the chance to disagree? Was he even asked? According to many sources, Michael had said on several occasions that nobody had checked with him first before upping the dates to 50. Is there validity to these claims? Or was Michael just terrified that what he believed would be a 10-show tour seemingly blew up right before his eyes?
What do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean?
On one hand, in the event that there was to be a show increase, Randy Phillips would discuss it with Tomei, who was then supposed to discuss it with Michael. Tomei was pretty much the middleman between Randy and Michael. Randy stated this during the 2013 AEG trial when asked how he would contact Michael. "I would contact Dr. Tomei. Generally, we would have our conversation, and then he would meet with or discuss with Michael, and then he would get back to me with the answers. That's how the process worked." Randy said that Paul Gongaware called him to request more shows be added to the tour. Then, Randy called Tomei and subsequently spoke to Michael.
Paul called me, said in his inimitable fashion, "Dude, can you call Dr. Tomei and see if Michael will agree to do more shows, because this is an unprecedented demand."
All right, and was that done?
Yes, I called Dr. Tomei.
Now, upon reading Paul's 2013 AEG trial testimony, this pretty much checks out. But what stuck out to me was when he was asked if Tomei had discussed the show increase to 50 with MJ. He said he didn't recall. But he also said Tomei didn't seem like he would have on his own just agreed to 50 without running it by Michael first. Because this is such a small detail, perhaps Paul truly didn't recall this, and despite how much all my homies hate Tomei, I don't think he would have just been able to get away with doing something like this without telling Michael. According to Jermaine Jackson, the number of shows increasing did bother Michael, but it was nothing he couldn't handle at the time. The only thing he complained about was that he'd signed up to do 10 shows only as advertised. But somewhere along the line, due to the demand for tickets, AEG had added an extra 40 dates. Even they sold out within 5 hours online. Michael said no one had checked with him first, but at no point did he give me the impression that the schedule was too punishing or beyond him, because it wasn't. Not for a man in his condition. 2 shows a week, which is what it was at the start, was a country club schedule for my brother, and it was exactly what he'd done on History. But now, he didn't have to travel because he was rooted in one city. He was 50, but he was dancing in rehearsal like it was 1996 all over again. Even Michael's longtime choreographer, Travis Payne, held the same sentiment and believed MJ could handle the 50 shows.
Do you think he was ready for the 50 concerts?
I absolutely think Michael was ready for the 50 concerts and more.
Do you think Michael was ready?
I do. I really do. I really do, because a lot of people don't realize that you say 50 shows, you think of that number. But it's really 50 shows stretched over 9 months.
Exactly.
So maybe 1.5 shows a week, maybe 2 at the most. And we did way more than that on History, as you know. So yeah, I think he was ready.
Can we stop the cap with the averages of shows per week as well? Because it's so clear MJ was not doing 1 show a week or even 2 shows a week at times. I wholeheartedly believe that number could have gone up to 3 or 4 times a week, once maybe he got into the swing of things. Nonetheless, as much as some of y'all hate for me to say it, MJ knew what he signed up for.
Well, why you boring me? I'm right.
Unless he just didn't read what he signed. Okay. The contract was for 31 shows, so he knew, at best, 31 was the cap in the beginning. As far as 50, I believe that increase was made known to him as well. And as a matter of fact, longtime fan and author of a real-life fairy tale, Michael Jackson and Me, Talitha Linehand, stated in her book that MJ was very excited initially when the increase was first announced around March 2009. However, when I talked to him the day after the final 20 concerts were announced, bringing the total to 50, he seemed excited about them, and this was the impression that he continued to give throughout the following months. Prior to that, however, one of AEG's infamous oral agreements took place where MJ gave his verbal approval to go to 50 and laid out his requests to Randy for increasing the shows.
But Michael Jackson had some requests to do more shows, right?
That is correct.
And what were those requests?
Well, what he wanted was, 50 shows. That was the maximum amount of shows he wanted to do, because he didn't want to, as he said to me, live in London and have to get a new passport. Condition 1 was that I find an estate for him to live in and the children. And then condition 2 was that at the 50th show, he wanted me to arrange for the Guinness Book of World Records to be there, because he knew this was a feat that no performer would ever be able to beat.
I said, but what can I get you to do that? He says, and then he knew instantly, because he's such a great manipulator. Sorry. He said, if you get me a house with 16 and a half acres and a pond and horses and stables, and I can have writers there to write my bio and to do my thriller movie, if you do that, I'll do the 30 shows. Okay, so he knew exactly what house he wanted, where he wanted it, and the whole thing. So I said, done. I'll get you whatever you want. You want to live in number 10 Downing Street? I'll figure that out. Whatever you want. And then we blew through the 30 and ended up having to go to 50.
Hold up. Let's back up for a second. Remember how I said MJ gave his verbal approval to go to 50 shows? Well, if we take a look at paragraph 16.1 of MJ's agreement, under the miscellaneous section where it says integrated agreement, it states, each party agrees that any prior negotiations, statements, representations, or agreements with respect to the subject matter herein are merged in and superseded by this agreement, and that such party has not railed on any representation or promise, oral or otherwise, which is not set forth in this agreement. This agreement may not be modified or amended except by a writing signed by the party to be bound.
But I'm not done yet.
If we go down even further to section 16.8 under notices, it says, all notices, approvals, and consents required or permitted to be given hereunder, or which are given with respect to this agreement, shall be in writing. So does this mean that technically, in order for AEG to increase the shows, which would be considered an amendment or a modification of the original agreement, they should have put that in writing? Because they didn't. When Chantrell was asked about this in court, he said, we have the verbal approval, which was all that was necessary to do that. But doesn't the contract say approvals have to be put in writing? And because this wasn't put in writing, does that make this null and void?
Hello?
You know what? Let me stop talking about sugar honey iced tea. To get back to my original point, MJ definitely was made aware of the show increases. However, they did not happen overnight as he had been telling fans. It was actually a few weeks after the March 5th press conference that the shows increased to 31 and then to 50. As Charles Thomson stated, the reality of the enormity of what he signed up for began to emerge and the fear was sinking in. Hence the Invincible-like tour. He went on to say that he woke up one day and the shows were up to 50. Now my man's Michael, he had every right to feel fearful. The stage felt like home to him. His shyness disappeared. It was a safe space. He knew on stage he was amongst people in a room that truly loved him. But after the trial, he didn't really know that anymore. The entire world had turned against him. The media took every aspect of this man's life and made it into a spectacle. He was never the same after that. And I make it a point to bring this up because I feel as though a lot of us truly don't understand how much that trial affected him. I feel like a part of him died, and he was trying so hard to bring it back to life. If Michael Jackson sells half his Sony catalog, nobody gets paid except Michael Jackson. If Michael Jackson endorses something, nobody gets paid except Michael Jackson. But if Michael Jackson does a show, everybody gets paid. Alright, now that we understand how the shows got up to 50, let's move on to what is known as a 90-10 deal. Randy Phillips pretty much explains this as, when the artist goes on the road, the artist gets 90% of the net gross, meaning what they take out of an arena at the end of the night after they pay expenses for security, advertising, stuff like that. We then split it 90-10. 90% goes to the artist, 10% goes to the promoter. In Section 4 of Michael's agreement, under artist compensation, it states, artists shall be entitled to receive 90% of the net pool revenue on a fully cross-collateralized basis, contingent compensation.
I know some of these words.
Okay, net pool revenue is everything MJ takes home after expenses and other deductions. So let's say he made $1 million and the expenses are $300,000. He would take home $700,000. Now we know what collateral is. That's nothing new in the world of Michael Jackson. Wait, I wasn't even trying to throw shade, oh my god. Collateral is something pledged as security for repayment. Cross-collateral is using collateral for one loan as security for another loan. So multiple loans are secured with the same asset. If we break down contingent compensation, contingent means occurring or existing only if certain circumstances are the case. It's dependent on. Compensation is that cash money, honey. So something has to take place before money is paid out. But what is to take place? Were they not gonna run our man's his check? My understanding is yeah, they were going to, but that pay was subject to a lot of deductions, and not just the ones Randy Phillips listed. Artist advances, production advances, pool expenses, aka venue rental, security, advertising, etc., AEG's 5% producer's fee, oh I clocked it, and production costs would also be deducted from that 90% as well. Let's focus on the production costs for right now. According to Leonard Rowe, and I know how we feel about Leonard Rowe, but go ahead and let him cook. Per his book, What Really Happened to Michael Jackson, the King of Pop. In the language of this contract, production costs are meant to include everything from artist-related production and related costs such as sound and lights, rigging motors, staging elements, video and pyrotechnical matters, photos and bios of the artists, the musical instruments of the band, their transportation and accommodations, passport expenses, and the cost of labor unions, along with the dancers, backup singers, and the costs of the tour party, which includes the stagehands and related matters. Workers' compensation, liability, and cancellation insurance policies are all considered production costs. While AEG will advance these costs, they recoup every dime from Michael Jackson's share of the proceeds of the concerts. Not one dime is paid or advanced by AEG that is not recouped from Michael Jackson. This becomes all the more outrageous when you take into account that production costs are normally taken from the gross ticket sales before any breakdown or division is done between the artists and the promoter. Production costs are always treated as a show expense and are normally never taken from the artist's share directly. AEG also threw in Dr. Tome's payment as part of Michael Jackson's production costs, despite Tome having a separate agreement with AEG under his company, TT International, where he would be receiving $100,000 per month as mentioned in Clause 6.8 under Management, Agency, and Legal Costs, with the exception of the monthly fee owing under the terms of a separate agreement with TT International LLC for the services of Dr. Tome Tome, not to exceed $100,000 per month, which shall be included in production costs. Artist Co. shall be solely responsible and shall pay all costs associated with management and agency commissions or fees and legal fees of artists and or Artist Co., if any.
That's suspicious. That's weird.
It kind of seems like this 90% wasn't 90%ing. Now, obviously, it's expensive to go on tour, and of course, MJ would have had to pay some of the costs, but it's giving greed. Like, with all these deductions, it would be in his best interest to increase the shows to 50 and beyond. Oh, you know, so everybody gets paid. Diabolical. Just nasty work. Okay, what about the advances? What was AEG going to do for Michael Jackson? In case we forgot what an advance is, it is defined as a type of loan or payment in which money or goods are given before consideration is received, usually with the expectation of repayment. So these advances would ultimately be taken out of MJ's 90% and were secured with a promissory note, which we'll talk about in a second. First, $5 million would be going to MJ as his initial artist advance, 3 of which would be used to settle his business with Prince Abdullah and the 2C's Records debacle. When MJ signed that contract with him in Bahrain back in 2006, he essentially signed away his touring and music rights, so he couldn't perform, which was obviously a crucial need. So that was promptly taken care of. It was also promptly taken care of because according to section 16.4.2 of the contract, MJ wasn't going to see any more advance money until he did.
And
The remaining $2 million would go straight to the Artist Co., MJ's company. Second, AEG would also pay $100,000 a month for 12 months, totaling $1.2 million on MJ's home at 100 North Carrollwood Drive. Third, he was going to receive a $15 million advance as a down payment for his new Neverland-style home he would dub Wonderland in Las Vegas. But this would technically be under a letter of credit, meaning a financial document that guarantees a buyer's payment to a seller will be received on time and in full, once certain conditions are met. And what conditions would those be, you might ask? If we take a look at section 4.2.3 under letter of credit / resident purchase, the first thing you see is conditioned upon the issuance of cancellation insurance in accordance with paragraph 13.1. AEG was on Michael Jackson's BALLS's about this cancellation insurance, I'll tell you what. Pretty much all the advances were conditional upon MJ obtaining life, non-performance, and cancellation insurance, or AEG would be named as the lost payee, meaning a person or entity that is named on an insurance policy to receive payment in the event of a covered loss or damage to the insured property. A life insurance policy where AEG is the lost payee and not, you know, his children or his mother is kinda nasty work. Nonetheless, the $15 million advance was also conditional upon having MJ's signature on a promissory note. A promissory note, sometimes called a promise to pay agreement, is a written promise in which one party agrees to repay another party. If a borrower violates the terms of a valid promissory note, the lender may have the right to recover its money. This was just another way for AEG to go ahead and let MJ know not to F around and find out about repaying them.
See, as you can see, the more you fuck around, the more you're gonna find out.
As I've pointed out numerous times, my man Michael had a tendency to grab a quick bag and hee-hee into the wind. LOVE though, that's still my man. If we go to Exhibit C in MJ's contract, it reads, for value received, the undersigned, the Michael Jackson Company, LLC, and Michael Jackson promises to pay on a joint and several basis to AEG Live, LLC, the principal amount of $6,200,000 United States dollars with interest on such amount until paid. So this note is for a total of $6.2 million, which I assume is because of the $5 million spent on MJ's entanglement with Prince Abdullah, and the $1.2 million total spent on the rent for MJ's home on Carrollwood. Now, interest would be at 0% until 6 months after the last show date of the first leg of the tour on September 30th, 2009, but no later than December 31st, 2009. In the event that MJ didn't have the money to pay this back, 10% interest would be tacked on per annum, which is a fancy way of saying per 12 months. 10% of $6.2 million is $620,000. MJ also had the option of renewing the term and extending the maturity date, aka that December 31st, 2009 date. date. So far, this seems pretty standard. Now, this $6.2 million sum is collateralized not by Michael Jackson, but by the Michael Jackson Company, LLC. If we go to page 2 of the promissory note, it states in bold, security agreement collateral owned by Artist Co. only. Artist is not pledging any collateral. To quote Leonard Rowe's book, AEG gets real slick here in this promissory note, because the entire note is collateralized not by Michael Jackson the artist, but by the Michael Jackson Company, LLC. Why is this, you may wonder? More than likely, it is because Michael Jackson's business holdings, which would include his publishing rights and catalog, are owned by the Michael Jackson Company, LLC, and not Michael Jackson the individual artist. So if the promissory note is for any reason not paid or defaulted upon, the assets of the Michael Jackson Company, LLC get forked over to AEG. In other words, owning the Michael Jackson Company, LLC, and or its assets means owning Michael Jackson. In other words, your butt is mine. Now I know what you're thinking. If MJ failed to pay back AEG, they were gonna take his Sony catalog. Not exactly. AEG couldn't just take MJ's Sony catalog. So they say. They would essentially just get any royalties or revenue stream it generated, at least according to Sean Trell per his AEG trial testimony. There's this whole notion thus far that we could just take his music catalog, for example. That's not the case. What we would have had a right to was if it got any royalties or if there was a revenue stream thrown off by his catalog. We would have a right to that revenue stream to pay down the amounts that he owed to us, but we could not take an interest, a percentage interest, whatever is meant by that, in his music or publishing catalog. As far as everything else, I assume it was free real estate, his investment holdings, memorabilia, and things like that. Anything they could take to sell to recoup their advances. Michael couldn't even file for bankruptcy to get out of this. If maker shall make a general assignment for the benefit of creditors, or shall file or have filed against it a petition for relief under any chapter or provision of the bankruptcy laws of the United States, as amended from time to time, and in the case of involuntary proceeding, the same is not dismissed within 60 days thereof, then, upon the occurrence of any such event of default or upon the expiration of the term of this note, holder at its election and without presentment, demand, notice of any kind, all of which are expressly waived by the maker, may declare the entire outstanding balance of principal and interest thereon immediately due and payable, together with all costs of collection, including attorney's fees, and or may exercise upon or enforce its rights to its collateral, as are set forth in this agreement. Hit it, Michael! Your butt is mine! By going over these few main points, hopefully it gives a better understanding of the stress that was looming over Michael Jackson as he prepared for this tour. The possibility of losing his assets, being locked into way more shows than he originally thought he would be, and of course, the mental and physical aspects of touring that always plagued him. I mean, yes, of course this would have been somewhat easier on him, as he wouldn't have had to travel from city to city, but the way MJ prepared for his shows and exerted himself during his shows was all the same. There was some desire on his part to perform, but in our opinion, not that much. That's not why he went back to work when he did. This concert everybody was talking about, it was being put together because of his financial obligations. It wasn't, hey, we should do a show. No, it was, hey, you gotta do a show. You have to do a show to get out of this hole. Who wants that? He was a perfectionist. He wanted to do things on his own time with his own personal stamp on them. And who could do that under that kind of pressure? In February 2009, production on the tour and rehearsals had not started yet. These things wouldn't really start to pop off until after the March 5th press conference. AEG's doubt in Michael Jackson, I assume, was still very prevalent, whether they wanted to admit to that fact or not. With the press conference a month away, they were thirsty as hell to get the cancellation insurance secured. They had a hard time with getting insured because, number one, the demand in the London insurance market was rough, and finding a carrier to insure the eventual 50 shows was not an easy task, as it was a massive liability, given MJ's history of cancellations.
I'm done. Cut the show. I'm done. Take me off. Take me off. Cut the show.
And number two, there was tons of media speculation in the British press in regards to Michael Jackson's health, and none of it was good. So AEG had to figure out how to make insurers more comfortable, and to do that, they would contact a physician to do a full medical workup on MJ to prove he was in good health and quiet the media noise. As I referenced in the emails from early January, Dr. Slavitt was the physician they would choose to conduct this exam.
Part of the business proposition, Michael had to undergo a medical exam to get insurance.
Correct.
Do you have the results of that exam? Was there a drug test for that exam?
The insurance carrier sent a doctor out from New York named Dr. David Slavitt, I believe, and independent of us. We had nothing to do with it. He examined Michael for about 5 hours at his house, and I think they went somewhere for some other tests, and I'm sure there was a blood test. We're obviously not privy to the patient-doctor relationship with that information, but the insurance broker told us that he passed with flying colors, okay, and that the only issue was some slight hay fever.
On February 4th, 2009, otolaryngologist, the bougie way of saying an ears, nose, and throat doctor, Dr. David Slavitt conducted a physical exam on Michael Jackson. Right away, an ENT doing the exam seemed strange, but he apparently was someone that had done physicals for performance cancellation insurance before. Plus, he was a Lloyd's preferred physician and very trustworthy. Lloyd's of London would be the company AEG would ultimately get to insure the tour. Let's see. Do I have any tea on Dr. Slavitt? Oh, you know I got a little something something. Anyway, the exam took 2 to 4 hours and was conducted at Michael's home. It consisted of a patient history, blood tests, examination of the ears, nose, throat, his skin, heart, and lungs, but only with standard equipment like a stethoscope or blood pressure cuff. MJ was not weighed during this exam, as there were certain things he could simply self-report. He stated his weight was 127 pounds and his height was 5 foot 9 inches. By looking at him, Slavitt had said both seemed to be roughly accurate. MJ was also not tested for opiates or other drugs because Slavitt saw no indication of drug use. And if we're keeping it 100, personally, I believe that to be true. At this point in our timeline, I don't believe he was using anything outside of antibiotics, which he admitted to taking as he had caught a cold the children had. The only thing Slavitt found wrong with MJ was some mild nasal congestion and an allergy to the sun, both of which, again, MJ admitted to. So at this point in February 2009, you could say MJ was in good health, which makes his condition by June of 2009 all the more concerning. But the gag is, there's no evidence of MJ having any tests under physical strain, such as carrying weights or walking on a treadmill, mainly because that would have fallen under a comprehensive physical rather than just a general physical. Slavitt's job was only to make sure MJ was physically able to perform, and anything outside of that was not asked of him by AEG. I believe they just wanted enough information to have so they could shop it around to various insurance carriers. Now, the difference between a physical and a comprehensive physical is that with the comprehensive physical, MJ would have potentially gotten a chest x-ray, echocardiogram to measure the electrical activity of his heart, and a pulmonary function test, which would be used to assess the capabilities of his lungs. It seems odd he didn't undergo all of these tests initially, especially given that in his autopsy it was found that he had brain swelling, suffered with chronic bronchitis, and had interstitial pneumonitis, also simply known as scarring of the lungs. All of these things would definitely make it more difficult for MJ to exert himself on stage multiple nights a week. Before the stands start to come for me, yes, a lot of these issues could have simply been attributed to lupus, an autoimmune disease that essentially causes the body to attack its own tissues and organs, which MJ suffered with. They also could have been due to a number of things we haven't gotten to in our timeline yet. Cause some of y'all be coming for my neck! Nonetheless, it was still odd. Plus, this wasn't going to be the only physical he would have to do. Another one would eventually be set up for when MJ arrived in London to take place on July 6, 2009, about a week before the shows were to start. Paul Gongaware stated during his trial testimony that MJ did not want to have to do another exam. With this examination, things were going to be a lot more thorough. According to an email from June 22, 2009, MJ was going to receive a basic examination with blood tests, examination from an expert musculoskeletal orthopedic surgeon, and an assessment of his cardio and respiratory capacity with a CPX machine. The CPX measures heart, lungs, oxygen, etc., and he would have been wired up with ECG leads on his chest and a mouthpiece. An exam like this seems more appropriate given how long it had been since MJ performed and was in touring shape. On the real, I think AEG allegedly avoided it because, number one, at this point in our timeline, they were only trying to secure non-appearance and cancellation insurance for the tour. If they wanted life insurance, disability, or illness coverage, a more comprehensive exam would be required. Which brings us to number 2. Maybe AEG, allegedly, feared something bad might be revealed during the testing, hence prompting MJ to fail the exam and jeopardizing their abilities to get the tour fully insured. Plus, isn't it also kind of funny that this exam was supposed to take place on July 6th and the first show would be on July 13th? What if MJ had failed it? Would he still have had to perform? Would the tour be postponed? Judging by how MJ was the entire month of June, there was honestly a solid chance he would not have passed that exam.
Why you booing me? I'm right.
Nonetheless, Slavic collected his quick bag and he into the wind. For his services, he received $6,000 plus $3,000 for lab and supply and $5,849 for travel. Can someone make this math? $14,849, and he didn't even do a comprehensive exam. Man. Of course MJ was able to pass this exam with flying colors. Plus, at this point, the shows were still alleged to be 10, and 10 shows would be easy peasy hot bubbly and cheesy for MJ with his current physical status. On February 11th, insurance broker Bob Taylor would send an email to Paul Gongaware, co-CEO of AEG Live/Concerts West, upon receipt of MJ's test results. Bob said, "Thanks, Paul. I now have the medical and blood reports. Looks good. I now need more info of what is available. This will help with the presentation to insurers. I would like to offer insurers a medical update, say every 21 days. This could be Dr. Slavitt or a London-based doctor who we could recommend. I did not want to suggest this to the insurers if it would be difficult to deliver. What do you think? They may insist anyway." Bob also proceeded to ask Paul a series of questions to get more information regarding the tour. The contract says a minimum 80-minute set. What are you expecting, including intermissions and set changes? He went on to ask about the back-to-back shows, stating, "Can we delete them for now and try to add them in later once he's gotten some shows under his belt?" He asked if MJ would remain in London for the entirety of the run of shows as well. Paul replied, "I'm not ready to put anything in writing." He states this was because he didn't have the answers at that time and things weren't ready yet, since MJ had only signed his contract about a week and a half prior. Upon learning the results of MJ's physical, per Paul's trial testimony, he stated, "It just confirmed what I believed, that he was fine and he wasn't doing any drugs. He wasn't doing any of that stuff. He was good."
It's been confirmed to us that Jackson is in the UK now, and he's being lined up to appear in person at a press conference in London this Thursday to officially announce what is undoubtedly the biggest story in the music world this year. He's always insisted he can prove the doubters wrong.
There is still much more to come from Michael Jackson. My passion for music has never stopped, and I hope to see you very soon. I love you. God bless.
It is now the final week of February, right before the March 5th press conference, where MJ was to announce the This Is It tour. On February 27th, Randy was shook to his core because there was a chance that MJ might not board that plane to London. In an email to Paul Gongaware, Randy says, "I would worry less about a bullshit logo that has no relevance to the consumer and a lot more about the fact that MJ has not spoken to Dr. Tomei in a week and may not get on that plane Monday night, nor has he approved the marketing collateral. Where the fuck is your head on this?" Now, just to give some context to the first part of that email before I continue, Paul and Randy were arguing over the Concerts West logo being on some marketing material for the tour. AEG acquired promotion company Concerts West in 2001. Paul, as the co-CEO of Concerts West, wanted to protect his logo/brand. Anyway, Randy continues, "I am much more concerned that MJ may try to breach our agreement and leave us with a mess on our hands." Around this time period is when all the sugar honey iced tea was starting to pop up with Michael, Dr. Tomei, and the Julian's auction. I talked about this in the last section of part 1. Basically, one of the tactics Tomei had concocted as MJ's manager to bring in revenue and eliminate debt would be to auction his possessions, according to Randy per his 2013 AEG trial testimony. At that period of time, there was kind of a breakdown in Michael's relationship with Dr. Tomei over an auction that Dr. Tomei had set up, presumably according to Dr. Tomei that Michael had approved of, but had set up with Julian's auctions to get rid of a ton of memorabilia and stuff like that Michael Jackson had stored in warehouses, because I was told he was paying $200,000 a month for warehouses, so he arranged the auction to get some value out of this stuff. Everything that had been sitting at Neverland since he abandoned the property during the trial era would be taken by Darren Julian, founder of Julian's Auction. It was then to be set up as an exhibition in Beverly Hills, and eventually the items would be sold. MJ was fine with the exhibition and was fine with his things in storage being sold, but apparently his personal possessions not in storage were going to be sold as well. Everything from clothing, paintings, and furniture to the massive ornate gates that welcome visitors to Neverland Ranch. MJ was pissed and felt absolutely betrayed, so much so that he cut communication with Tomei, took legal action to halt the sale of his items, and subsequently fired Tomei.
The final straw came just months before Michael's death, as he announced his London concerts. A happy moment with drama backstage. Michael's personal possessions were up for auction, and Tomei got into a dispute with the auctioneers. In court papers obtained by NBC News, the auctioneer said Tomei's people actually threatened their lives, saying there will be bloodshed. Tomei denies ever telling anyone to say that, but it was enough for Michael Jackson to sever ties with the man who ran his life.
With Tomei and Michael not speaking, that meant Randy had lost his only contact to Michael. Randy stated, "My concern at this period of time is that I had no direct connection to Michael Jackson through his manager, who would have been the one who would have arranged for him to travel to London to do the press conference. At this point in time, I was flying blind because I didn't know what was happening in Michael's camp." To continue the emails from February 27th, Paul responds to Randy's concern about a potential breach of their agreement with Michael. He says, "Meantime, our play here is not to back off. We are holding all of the risk. If Michael won't approve it, we go without his approval. If Tomei isn't on that plane, it goes without him. My money is on Dr. Tomei. We let Mikey know just what it will cost him in terms of him making money, and then we go with or without him in London. We cannot be forced into stopping this," which Michael will try to do because he is lazy and constantly changes his mind to fit his immediate wants. So let me get this straight. Paul is saying regardless of if there's a press conference or not, regardless of if MJ and Tomei are on speaking terms, or Tomei is on that plane, or not on that plane, they're putting those tickets on sale, because perhaps this is just another tactic MJ was using to delay his commitments and find a way out.
What we didn't know at the time, but I later found out, was Michael had already welched on one previous press conference. So he'd signed the contract quite a while ago, and then he was supposed to come over and do the press conference, and he just never got on the plane. And apparently, I heard at the time, he actually fired his lawyer, a guy called Peter Lopez, because Peter Lopez was the point of contact. So he thought, if I fire my lawyer, then AEG won't be able to contact me. So he basically ghosted AEG the first time he was supposed to do the press conference, which I believe is why it was organised for the information to be leaked about what plane he was on and everything, because they didn't want him to be able to pull out. They wanted him to know that everybody knows he's here.
But if AEG could just put the tickets on sale whenever they wanted, it's almost as if the press conference was completely unnecessary. But let's put a pin in that. Paul continues with one final exchange. "Once we go on sale, which we have the right to do, he is locked. He has no choice. He has to do it."
He's going on tour, in July. Really? So he's gonna be in London for 3 months, maybe more. And it's gonna be a big comeback.
Where is he traveling? Where is he going?
He's traveling to UK, to London on Monday. So he's going to be on Thursday over there doing the press conference to announcing the new tour.
Then, of course, there's also a question mark over his health. It's been 12 years since his last world tour. Could this be a disaster waiting to happen?
I always believed he was going to do it. There was never a doubt in my mind. I was fully confident it was going to happen.
That's right, and the King of Pop is about an hour late for his own press conference.
What do we want? When do we want it? What do we want? When do we want it?
There was just something about his demeanour as well that you just didn't feel like he genuinely wanted to be there.
London welcomes the King of Pop, Mr. Michael Jackson.
It is now March 2009. This is when everything in regards to the tour would begin to take flight. MJ would take to the podium in London, England at the O2 Arena to announce his highly anticipated comeback, a 10-show residency kicking off in the summer of 2009 titled
This Is It.
a double entendre, meaning this would be the final time he was going to tour, and that when he hit the stage, this is the place in the world to be. Subsequently, tickets would go on sale and sell out in record-breaking time. Because of this feat, the 10 shows would be increased to 50, an amount no other performer had ever done at the O2 Arena before. But for right now, let's focus on what happened the day MJ took to the podium as we discuss the infamous March 5th press conference. Because according to Randy Phillips, the fact that the press conference even happened is a miracle.
And if he had missed that press conference, it was over, because no one believed he was going to perform again. or that I could get him to perform again or anyone.
In March of 2022, Randy Phillips did an interview with an American Conversation podcast. I've already used bits of the audio from this podcast and will be using it for the majority of me explaining what happened prior to the press conference. At the time of this recording in September of 2024, their YouTube channel and other various platforms they had their podcasts on have been wiped clean and or privated. With that being said, cue the music. Please don't sue me. I can't go back to the hood, y'all. I'm not trying to slander the women of this podcast. I'm trying to slander Randy Phillips. I mean, I'm trying to educate the people about what happened during the preparations for This Is It and Randy Phillips's involvement or lack thereof. Please don't shoot the messenger. This has been an attempt at a disclaimer. Thank you.
Everyone, pause this video and go brew a pot of tea. I mean it. Pause this video and brew a pot of tea, because you will be sipping.
First, let's discuss why a press conference was chosen as a means to announce the tour. This is typically something that isn't used to promote a concert tour, as most tours are announced via press release, covered in the press, and picked up in the wording. Press conferences are primarily used for special events, such as brand promotions or special collaborations. According to Randy, the reason he wanted Michael Jackson to do this was to essentially get the public excited about his return and remove any hesitation people had about his commitment to do the shows. Even Michael himself wanted the announcement to be something very special, unique, and big. To quote Randy's 2013 AEG trial testimony, "We thought that the best way to do this, to announce this, was to actually do a press conference where Michael Jackson appeared. In this case, because Michael had been gone so long and there was this kind of sort of credibility issue as to whether he would actually perform again and be serious about doing that, we thought the best way to dispel any of these issues was for him to appear in a press conference announcing the dates. It had been a long time since Michael had performed at all, and that alone would create kind of consumer concerns as to whether it's real and he's going to do it. And then Michael had had a series of cancellations and things like that over the course of his tours, and that's basically it. Plus, it was a very tough period for him, that period in the 2000s. I'll give Mr. Phillips that. The 2000s were a very tough time period for MJ. We went over this extensively back in part 1. With all of that being said, there was definitely a lot riding on this press conference, not only for Michael, but for AEG as well.
It's Michael Jackson and the whole circus, which is his life. I mean, that was a big risk to take, was it not?
No, it was a huge risk, and everybody warned me against doing it, okay, and that, ultimately he would break my heart. It wouldn't happen. I heard everything. It ran a full gamut. And you know what? In life, you have a very few opportunities in a career to touch greatness, and I've said this before. And they asked me if I would do this again, given everything that has happened. And the answer is hell yes.
Randy, I mean, you're a businessman. From a business standpoint, did you have concerns about being in business with Michael Jackson? I mean, given his history on backing out on some concert.
The answer, Anderson, is yes. It would be untruthful of me to say I wasn't. We had those concerns. I discussed it with the gentleman I work for, Phil Anschutz, who owns the company, and Tim Lewicki. But you know what? In very few times in anyone's career do you get a chance to touch greatness, okay? And to me, it was worth taking that risk. And a reporter asked me if I would do it all over again, and the answer is hell yes.
That's interesting, Randy. So, if you had the opportunity to, I don't know, allegedly scream at Michael Jackson so loud the walls were shaking, slap him, and throw him into a cold shower, you'd do it all over again? Or, as you allegedly told Karen Faye, you'd scrape Michael Jackson off the floor to get him to the press conference because he was so drunk? Good to know you'd love to repeat that experience. On March 3rd, Britney Spears embarked on her 7th World Tour, The Circus, starring Britney Spears, a tour that happened to be promoted by AEG Live. Randy Phillips was there at the opening show. He was responsible for making the deal, and with it being one of the top 5 tours of the year, he wanted to be there to show his support.
I had just started the Britney Spears tour, the circus tour in Miami. So I flew into Miami for that. Then I got on a plane and flew to London for the press conference on March 5th, 2009, where we were announcing This Is It and the concert and the whole thing.
Randy landed in London on the morning of March 5th with his business partner, Dave Loeffler, who was also a humongous scumbag, by the way.
I'm saying is just flush this the fuck out of me, man. It's way out of me, but leave my stress out.
No, I understand. Okay, but he's younger than us.
Fuck! No! I'm leaving! Say it again, I'm fucking out of here, Andy! I'm fucking out of here!
Stop.
Despite Michael and Dr. Tomei's rift over the Julian's auction, they boarded a plane to London, arriving on March 3rd with MJ's children, his security guard Alberto Alvarez, his hair and makeup artist, who at this time was not Karen Faye, and the children's nanny, who I believe doubled as the hair and makeup artist, according to Randy. Talitha Linehan recalls in her book receiving a phone call from MJ upon him landing. On March 3rd, 2009, shortly after 7 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, my phone rang. It was Michael. He had left Los Angeles the previous night on a flight to London amid rumors that he was planning to announce a series of concerts there. I just landed, he said, and I laughed and said, and I just woke up. I asked him how his flight was and how the children who I could hear chattering in the background were. And then I said, Michael, are you really doing 30 shows in London? Oh, well, he teased. I'm going to announce something. You'll see. MJ and Tomei were both staying in suites at the Lanesborough Hotel. Dave and Randy booked their suites at the Dorchester Hotel.
I take a shower. I'm at the Dorchester Hotel, which is catty corner to the Lanesborough, where Michael and his manager, Dr. Tomei, which is another story, were staying. So I went to have breakfast with them.
According to Randy's AEG trial testimony, Michael was not present at this breakfast. However, Dr. Tomei, Paul Gongaware, Dave Loeffler, and other various people involved in the press conference were. This breakfast meeting was just used as a way to touch base and talk about the logistics, timing, and setting of the O2 for the press conference, so that this information could be relayed back to Michael. After breakfast, Randy went back
and got dressed and came back to pick Michael up and take him out to the O2 in London, which is still about 90 minutes without traffic, and in traffic could be 2 hours or more, because it's London traffic mid-afternoon.
So both Dave and Randy went back to the Lanesborough Hotel. Dave would stay downstairs to get the convoy of vehicles arranged to take everyone to the O2. Randy would go upstairs to Dr. Tomei's room. Tomei had requested for him to meet there while Michael was presumably getting ready. The two of them were in his room for about 20 minutes watching the news. At approximately 1:45 p.m., Tomei would leave to go to Michael's suite down the hall.
So I'm sitting in Dr. Tomei's suite, which was right next to Michael's on the 3rd floor of the hotel. I'm in there watching CNN, waiting for Michael to get ready. I thought...
What's your view of the chance that he can realistically make a comeback at 50?
Well, first of all, when he shows up today, I hope he's not in pajamas like when he came late to court. That wouldn't be good for his career. I think there's a good chance that he could revive some of the old magic. I think he's desperate to do so because he needs the money. His career kind of slipped through his pasty fingers along with his entire face.
Nah, MJ. Let me handle this one. After about 10 to 15 minutes, Tomei would pop back into his room to give Randy an update. He recalled it was something along the lines of, Michael's just getting ready, he needs a little more time, don't worry about it, we'll get out on time. And then, once again, Tomei would leave to go back to Michael's room.
Dr. Tomei disappears. I'm still sitting in the suite. It's 2:15. The press conference is called for 3 o'clock. All my people are getting nervous and freaked out. We had 365 newspapers and television stations from around the world.
At this point, Randy's phone would start blowing up. Everyone wanted to know what was going on. He recalls he simply told them that they hadn't left the hotel yet. Michael's getting ready, but we're good. Everything's good. Or so he thought.
So I'm sitting there and time's passing. My phone is ringing off the hook. Phil Anschutz, who I worked for, Tim Lightwicki, Paul Gongware, who was at the O2 waiting for me. So finally I just get up and now it's 3 o'clock, which is when he was supposed to go on stage and do the press conference.
Once he decides to get up, he leaves Dr. Tomei's room and begins pacing up and down the hallway to try to ease his anxiety. He had a Bluetooth earpiece in one of his ears taking phone calls and his BlackBerry in his hands typing emails. Randy was absolutely losing his sugar honey iced tea, y'all. I'm talking his palms were sweaty, knees weak, arms were heavy. Sources say there was even vomit all over his dress shirt. Mom's spaghetti.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
As Randy Phillips stated during the AEG trial, he was nerve-wracked, time was slipping away, and MJ's career was slipping away. He feared his worst nightmare was coming to fruition, that MJ was going to breach AEG's agreement and leave them with a mess on their hands. Finally, Tomei would pop out of Michael's room. According to Randy's recollection, Tomei said, "We have a little issue." Randy goes, "Okay. What is that?" Tomei says, "Well, Michael got drunk. I'm sobering him up, we're getting him ready, we'll get him ready, but we're going to be a little bit late." Tomei would then disappear back into Michael's room, and this is when the story starts to take an unfortunate turn. I know what we're all probably thinking. Why would Michael Jackson be drunk at like 3 in the afternoon the day he was to announce his comeback? Well, the first thing we need to reiterate is that MJ was deeply wounded by everything that happened to him during the trial era. I mean, he was just vindicated in 2005, only 4 years prior, and the allegations themselves span over a decade prior. Even though he was vindicated, an accusation like that never goes away. He felt absolutely despised by the general public as a result and feared that if he went to that press conference, no one would be there. Dr. Tomei had even asked Randy if they should hire a rent-a-crowd to be at the airport when they landed in London to make him feel good, which of course they didn't have to do, and didn't do, because it's Michael Jackson. Nonetheless, he genuinely thought people didn't care about him anymore. So on one hand, the drinking could have been to soothe his anxiety, and on the other hand, it could have been to get out of having to do the press conference altogether.
It's true, but he shouldn't say it.
Because if there was one thing Michael was gonna do, it was try to find a way to get out of doing something. Which again, in this instance, I genuinely believe was because of anxiety, which is valid, and perhaps a tinge of self-destruction. That being said, I know I've harped on this specific point a lot, but sometimes MJ was his own worst enemy, just like any of us at times are our own worst enemies. LOVE though, because don't get it twisted, I still love that man down. Personally, I find it odd that Tomei said MJ was drunk, don't you? Because I don't believe he was, and well, neither did Randy Phillips.
Was Mr. Jackson drunk?
No. Not to the best of my knowledge, no.
As a matter of fact, did Tomei tell Randy MJ was drunk at all? Or did he say MJ was hungover?
To the best of my knowledge, based on statements made to me by Dr. Tomei, Michael was scared of the reception he was going to get because he hadn't been in the public eye in so long, and that he might be hungover.
Interesting. And he was hungover because he drank the night before, right, Randy?
And he was very, very insecure. One of the reasons he drank so much the night before is he didn't think people liked him. He really didn't. He was that insecure, which when you think about his accomplishments and the music and how it is like the background of our lives, it didn't make any sense, but it's how he feels.
Well, butter my backside and call me a biscuit.
What?
It appears Michael Jackson wasn't drunk, and when Randy walked into MJ's room, and I'm about to explain that whole scenario, what did he find?
Hungover?
Hungover.
That's what Dr. Tomei told you?
Correct.
You didn't see that yourself?
At one point during the afternoon, I went into the room as Michael was getting prepared, and he seemed a bit hungover. I mean, I'm not an expert, and I don't drink, so I've never been hungover, so it's just an observation.
Well, my hunch is in 30 years in the music industry, you may have seen
drunk people
hungover at some point, no?
Actually, no.
How about drunk people?
Yes.
Okay. Was Mr. Jackson drunk?
No. Not to the best of my knowledge, no.
Another one, thank you. Another one, thank you. Another one, thank you. Another one.
Okay, Rogaine, Randy, let me explain to you and the girls in the balcony exactly the difference between being drunk and being hungover. When you're drunk, it's the feeling you have while the alcohol is still in your blood, typically when you're actively drinking. Usually, telltale signs of this are slurred speech, stumbling, drastic mood swings, and impaired cognitive function, which affects your ability to learn, comprehend, and reason. Of course, drunkenness presents itself differently in everybody, and can be influenced by other factors such as medications, body weight, gender, and the rate of consumption. But Randy, if you're watching this and you want to know more, more. Since you've promoted one of his tours, why don't you ask your good friend Justin Timberlake? A hangover is the aftermath of drinking excess alcohol. It typically can make someone feel nauseous, fatigued, and more restless or anxious as your blood alcohol levels return to normal. So with that being said, if we assume Michael drank the night before the press conference due to his anxiety about it, and the next day he was hungover, which can cause someone to feel a bit more restless and anxious, then we could say MJ could have been experiencing general anxiety worsened with the effects of alcohol / a hangover, which still does not justify the behavior Randy Phillips exhibited towards Michael Jackson in that room. Nothing does. Especially since, according to Tomei, he over-exaggerated MJ's condition. To quote Untouchable by Randall Sullivan, more than 3 years later, Tomei would say that Phillips's emails exaggerated Michael's condition. Dennis Hawk agreed. He might have drunk a couple glasses of wine to relax, Hawk said. I wouldn't have blamed him if he drank a whole bottle, given how big the moment was for him, but if he'd made the kind of scene Randy described in those emails, I think I would have heard about it. I didn't. Now, let's cut back to the hallway where Randy just got the news that MJ was drunk and they were going to be late for the press conference. So upon hearing the unexpected news that his star was currently incapacitated and they were going to be late for the press conference, Randy would send an email on his BlackBerry to his boss / direct report, CEO of AEG, Tim Leiweke.
MJ is locked in his room, drunk and despondent. Tomei and I are trying to sober him up and get him to the press conference with his hairdresser makeup artist.
We've already established that Michael Jackson wasn't drunk, at least by the time Randy entered the room. But was he despondent? According to our good friend Google, despondent means feeling or showing profound hopelessness, dejection, discouragement, or gloom. Personally, I find this to be a bit of an exaggeration, but I don't know. What do you think, Randy? Was MJ despondent?
Was Mr. Jackson drunk?
No. Not to the best of my knowledge, no.
Okay. Was he despondent?
No.
Another one, thank you.
In response to MJ being drunk and despondent, Tim Leiweke replies with, "Are you kidding me?"
Sir, I'm going to hand you Exhibit 9. Have you read that, sir?
Yes.
Do you recall receiving this email from Mr. Randy Phillips?
No.
And so this is dated March 5th, 2009. Mr. Phillips wrote to you, according to this exhibit, MJ is locked in his room, drunk and despondent. Do you see that at the bottom of the page?
I read it.
Okay. Do you know who he was referring to with MJ?
I don't remember this email.
Can you make an estimation about who he may have been referring to with MJ?
I can only assume, but I don't know. I don't remember this email.
In case we forgot, Randy is still out in the hallway. So at this point, all the information he is receiving is coming directly from Tomei, who would from time to time pop out of MJ's room to calm him down and give him updates. He himself had no idea of Michael Jackson's condition, as he had not seen it for himself. Well, why would he tell his boss this alleged information without seeing it himself?
That he might be hungover.
Hungover?
Hungover.
That's what Dr. Tomei told you?
Correct.
You didn't see that yourself?
At one point during the afternoon, I went into the room as Michael was getting prepared.
So the email was phrased that way because at some point he felt like he would be going into the room, and that's what he was planning to do anyway. Help to sober MJ up and get him ready. Randy walked down to MJ's room door, and his security guard, Alberto Alvarez, was standing there. According to Randy's 2013 trial testimony, the interaction went something like this. I went to the door and I said, "Alberto, you've got to let me in. This is not good. This is a crisis situation. I have to get in that room because we have people waiting. We have press and all that." And he could see by my face it was not the time to stop me, so he let me in.
Aw, dang it.
Close, but no cigar, Randy. I may have quoted Eminem earlier, but I don't love the way you lie, and I'm not afraid to take a stand.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Tell us what actually happened.
So I went to to his suite, which was next door. I walked down the hallway, and his security guard, Alberto, was there. And he said, "Mr. Phillips, I can't let you in." I said, Alberto, I know this sounds like a line, but look me in the eyes. If you don't let me in his suite right fucking now, okay, I promise you, you will never work again in this business. And look me in the eye. I'm 100% serious. It's not a threat. was a promise. Of course, he let me in.
If we look at his testimony from the 2017 MJ Estate versus IRS tax trial, he keeps this same energy when recounting the scenario. He says, and I quote, "If he misses this press conference, okay, we will have no credibility, okay? The tour will be ruined. It's over." And then I said, I said to him
that
I said, "Alberto, you've got to let me in this room, okay? And I'm serious about this because if you don't, okay, I promise you, you will not get another job in this town." I know, it sounds very cliche, I know, but at this point, I was sweating bullets and very, very concerned. Yeah, Randy was concerned, all right. Concerned about his job, his account balance, and his reputation. This man seemingly didn't have a crumb of concern for Michael Jackson. With everything Randy went through to get to this moment, the idea of it being destroyed because MJ couldn't get it together made him absolutely furious. Keep this in mind as Alberto finally lets Randy into the room.
I went in and Michael was sprawled out on the sofa, completely passed out with an empty bottle of vodka on the floor.
Loud and wrong, Mr. Phillips. MJ wasn't passed out, because if he was, then that makes your 2013 trial recollection not make any sense. He said, and I quote, "When I first walked into the room, Michael was sitting on the couch. He had a robe on and his pants, and I remember seeing a bottle of what I thought was a clear bottle, so I assumed it was vodka. Could be gin, whatever. Bottle of booze on the foot of the couch. So this was not exactly what I expected to see at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and we still had to get out to the O2. I talked to him. I said, 'Michael, are you okay?' And that's when he said to me that he was really concerned that there was not going to be anyone there, and that people didn't care anymore. Maybe this would be a bust or something to that effect. At which time I explained to him that, 'Michael, you're quite wrong. You've got over 3,000 adoring fans who have been there for hours waiting for you, probably camped out overnight the night before. Every major press organization in the world. Trust me, Michael, they want to see you.' So, number one, MJ was not passed out on the couch. Number two, MJ was coherent enough to hold a conversation with Randy and rationally tell him what was bothering him. And number three,
lies, lies, and more lies, and lies on top of lies.
Renegade! Randy, be entirely for real. You expect us to believe that after you've dealt with having to sit in Tomei's hotel room waiting for MJ, pacing up and down the hallway anxiously while your phone was blowing up with emails and calls from concerned people at the O2, so much so that you stated you turned your phone off, and after you chewed Alberto out at the door to get into MJ's room, that you walked into that room with nothing but love and encouragement for Michael? That you, Brandon Phillips, were the messiah sent to get MJ ready for the press conference? That's quite rich. See, because I believe you went into that room and started yelling at him. Perhaps, I don't know, so loud the walls were shaking, and then you slapped him.
I went in and Michael was sprawled out on the sofa, completely passed out with an empty bottle of vodka on the floor. So this was not exactly what I expected to see at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And we still had to get out to the O2. I put him upright on the couch. I gently tapped him on the cheeks to revive him.
Wait. Run that back?
I gently tapped him on the cheeks to revive him.
One more time for the girls in the balcony that are hard at hearing.
I gently tapped him on the cheeks to revive him.
Of course. He's downplaying it. This man went into MJ's room and created a hostile environment because of his own inability to handle his emotions. This is reaffirmed by what he said during the AEG trial. Randy stated, "I admitted to being a bit of a drama queen. I was so nervous about the situation. I created so much tension in that room at the time because I was tense. And you could cut the tension with a knife because time was ticking away. All these things were happening at the same time." For him to say he gently tapped MJ on the cheeks is a bigger lie than the Casio tracks. What makes this even more appalling is he bragged about it in several emails to his colleague. An email was sent to his boss, Tim Liwicki, stating, "I screamed at him so loud the walls were shaking." Then, one was sent to Dave Loeffler downstairs, stating, "I just slapped him and screamed at him louder than I did with Arthur Cassell." For reference, Arthur Cassell is someone he once screamed at over a booking issue with Lionel Richie. In his AEG trial testimony, he went on to say Arthur Cassell was one of the most annoying human beings on the face of the earth, and he actually screamed at him over the phone loud enough to shake the glass walls of his office. So we can assume that if Randy screamed at MJ louder than that, he was screaming pretty loud. Randy was asked under oath about slapping Michael Jackson as well as screaming at him during the 2013 AEG trial by the Jackson's attorney, Brian Panish. And I'm just going to read it verbatim, and of course, the link to this transcript is in my source notes as always, darling. "Did you write that you just slapped Mr. Jackson? Yes or no?" "No." "Okay, you didn't write I just slapped him?" "Yeah, I wrote that." "Okay, but that's an exaggeration again, right?" "No. I slapped him, but you slapped him like, oh, like a nice slap, like, oh, come on, let's go. And then you proceeded to scream louder than you did at Arthur Cassell. Is that correct? Here's what I did, okay? This was a very tense situation, and you know, frankly, I created the tension in that room, okay? Because I was so nerve-wracked, okay? The time was slipping away and his career slipping away, okay? When you wrote, I just slapped him, was that an exaggeration? Nah. I slapped him on the butt. Okay. And when you screamed louder than you did at Arthur Cassell at the time the windows shook in your office, was that another exaggeration? At the time, it was an exaggeration. Yes. First, when Randy said he slapped MJ on the butt, he meant in the way a coach would with a football team getting ready to leave. Kind of like this.
Nice catch, Percy.
Based off of what Randy said here, though,
I gently tapped him on the cheeks to revive him.
That seems like a bold-faced, italicized, and underlined lie. Another one, thank you. As far as Randy screaming at MJ, I think the way he phrased it could have been an exaggeration, but I definitely do think he yelled at him. However, if we ask Randy, you know, he just raised his voice a whittle.
Did you yell at him? At some point during the afternoon, yeah, you know, the word yell might be a little bit extreme, and I might have used it to describe it, but at one point it was taking so long, we were waiting for him to get ready, and there was one item of clothing that he was waiting for, and time was ticking away, and I got a little louder, a little more affirmative than I had been in dealing with him up to then.
Randy, give Michael Jackson his loafers back and stop dancing around the question.
Did you yell at him? I raised my voice. I was a little firm.
To add insult to injury, Michael's children were in the other room. According to Randy's trial testimony from the 2017 MJ Estate versus IRS tax trial, there's a 2-bedroom suite. The kids were in the other room with the hair and makeup woman who served also as a nanny for them. She was there with them and I heard cartoons on. To go off like that, with his young children in the next room? Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Go straight to hell, Randy Phillips. But if you thought that this situation couldn't get any worse, unfortunately, it does. I assume after Randy slapped Michael Jackson, allegedly, and somewhere in between screaming at him, he and Dr. Tomei would, allegedly, throw Michael Jackson into a cold shower.
I put him upright on the couch. I gently tapped him on the cheeks to revive him. I carried him into the shower with Alberto, and we put a cold shower on him, okay, just to revive him.
You'll notice that he said he and Alberto put MJ into a cold shower. There's no mention of Tomei. According to Randy's 2013 AEG trial testimony, Michael got up and went into the bathroom with Dr. Tomei, and Alberto may have been helping at this time. With this recollection, we're shown that Michael wasn't in as bad of a condition as Randy had been alleging in his dramatized emails, especially since he was able to get up on his own and go into the bathroom. During the 2017 IRS tax trial, he stated, Tomei and I took him into the shower with Alberto and put him in the shower, just to get him up and stuff like that. It was probably a cold shower. Once again, Alberto is still included in this scenario, but for the life of me, I don't believe he was part of such a heinous act. Let's refer back to Randy's 2013 AEG trial testimony again as Brian Panish questions him about an email sent to Dave Loeffler. And you're telling Mr. Loeffler that you and Dr. Tomei threw Michael Jackson in a cold shower, right? Correct. And then he tells you you're crazy. Yes. And then you, 2 minutes later, approximately 3 minutes later, you correct him, right? While you're dealing with Mr. Jackson, who was drunk and despondent, you're correcting Mr. Loeffler on his grammar, right? It's a habit I tend to have. I just have to stop to say that Randy was correcting the Y-O-U-R to a Y-O-U''RE, in case that wasn't apparent. But while all this is going on in a short period of time and everything was jammed together, and you're so busy, you're correcting your friend on his grammar, correct? That's the role I play with most of my executives as a mentor. Yes.
Oh! Somebody! Oh! He needs some milk!
After MJ showered and got dressed, he would emerge from the master bedroom wearing black slacks, boots, and a white V-neck shirt. It would be at this point Randy would become even more irate as MJ couldn't decide which satin shirt to wear, the royal blue, black, or red.
We got him ready. We're late as hell now, and everyone's freaking out at the O2 Arena, and we're late as hell. And then we got him dressed, and he couldn't decide between that shirt, that like Western shirt with the chevrons. He couldn't decide between the blue, royal blue, the black, or the red. Now, I'm dying. I'm not near death. I said, Michael, it doesn't fucking matter. Pick a color. Okay.
At some point, while the shirt debacle was going on and MJ was finishing getting ready, Randy would send an email to Tim Lywicki stating, Tomei and I have him dressed and they are finishing his hair. Then we are rushing to the O2. This is the scariest thing I have ever seen. He's an emotionally paralyzed mess, filled with self-loathing and doubt now that it is showtime. He is scared to death. Right now, I just want to get through this press conference. I screamed at him so loud, the walls were shaking.
And did you conclude, based on what you saw, that Mr. Jackson was an emotionally paralyzed mess?
That was a description I used to describe what I encountered, what my observation was.
You know what I'm talking about,
Yes.
right? You sent an email to Mr. Lywicki.
Yes.
Would you agree with me, sir, that you described Mr. Jackson in Exhibit 7 as an emotionally paralyzed mess?
That is correct.
And you said, this is the scariest thing I've ever seen.
That's what I wrote at the time.
Okay. And was it also an exaggeration when you wrote, this is the scariest thing I've ever seen?
Well, the size and the scope of what was going on, it was one of the most concerning things. I don't know if, looking back at it, if I would have said the scariest, having been in this business as long as I have.
Okay. Was that an exaggeration?
A little bit.
Did you ever tell anybody that you scraped Mr. Jackson off the floor in his hotel room in London before the press conference?
Not to my knowledge.
When you say not to my knowledge, is it your testimony that you don't remember ever saying that, or is it your testimony that you did not say that?
I don't remember ever saying that.
Okay, so it may have happened, it may not have happened, you're not sure.
I'm not sure.
He would also send an email to a business associate of his stating, I haven't pulled it off yet. We still have to get his nose on properly. You have no idea what this is like. He is a self-loathing, emotionally paralyzed mess. I just slapped him. Somebody cut my mic before I say something I ain't got no business saying. During the AEG trial, Randy stated the email to Tim Lywicki in regards to MJ being an emotionally paralyzed mess was more in reference to the scene he had walked into upon coming into MJ's room. That was my reflection and observation of my conversation with him when I first walked into the room, and he was so insecure about whether people even care and this thing was going to be successful. But to say it's the scariest thing you've ever seen is a bit much, isn't it, Randy?
Was there anything that you saw that afternoon before getting to the press conference that scared you? In terms of Mr. Jackson's condition, behavior?
Yeah, well, the word scary, in looking back at it, probably is an overreaction to what was going on that afternoon, the fact that we were late for the press conference. And yeah, when you have a press conference to announce the comeback of the greatest star in the world, and he's running 2 hours late, and he appeared to be somewhat hungover. Yeah, I would say, I'm not sure scary, looking back, if I'd use the word scary or really more concerned.
As we know, MJ would end up going with the black shirt for the press conference, but there was still one more thing he needed, and he refused to leave the hotel without it, his signature armband. MJ would often wear an armband for a few different reasons. For him, it was a symbol of solidarity with the suffering children of the world, and also a way to make his clothes stand out more. On stage, it would draw attention to the way he moved when dancing. Nonetheless, per Randy's 2013 trial testimony, Michael wouldn't leave unless he left with his sequin armband, the sequin armband on his shirt. And they had to ask the hotel engineer to go and figure out how to put this armband on because they had no way of securing it. And that, to me, at that point, that was more than I could take. This thing was ready to fall apart. We would have never gotten there on time, and we were spending 10 to 15 minutes trying to figure out how to put on an armband. So what I did, I raised my voice and pretty much said, guys, that's enough.
He had an armband that he couldn't get on, so I had to get the engineer to put it at the hotel to fasten it on before he would leave. Every second is a death knell. I would not leave.
This is the situation Randy said he was referring to in his email to Tim Lywicki when he said he screamed so loud the walls were shaking. There's no doubt in my mind he screamed at Michael Jackson over an armband, but I'm going to go on a limb and say this is not the only instance he screamed at MJ during the afternoon. This was probably just one of many. After the armband fiasco, everyone went downstairs and boarded into the van to head to the O2. Randy, Dave Loeffler, Dr. Tomei, Alberto Alvarez, and MJ's good friend, Mark Lester, who played Oliver Twist in the 1968 film Oliver. Randy said, once everyone was in the van, he went into jester mode to lighten the mood. The mood he created, mind you. Upon doing that, he said MJ's mood improved and he was quite fun.
So we finally get him into the what we call a sprinter van, which is like a blown-up van, like a little bus. We get him in there. There's thousands of kids and fans at the hotel to get out of there. I have police escort. So we're all in in the van. A couple of guys who worked for me, Michael. The young man, he wasn't young at that point, but who played Oliver Twist, and the original Oliver Twist is now an orthopedic, what do you call a chiropractor in London, and Mark Lester. So we're all in the Sprinter van, and Michael is sitting there with his sunglasses on like this. He has them on like this. like still out of it. And he keeps saying to me, "This is Randy. You look so thin. I can't believe how thin you look." Now he knows I'm pissed off, so he's trying to butter me up. And he said this about 10 times. And I was the heaviest I've ever been in my life in that van. Okay, sweating bullets. So I said, "Michael, what do you expect?" Okay, I've been pacing up and down that hallway for 2 of the worst hours of my life just to get you in this van.
On the way to the O2, he said there were great conversations. MJ was talking to Dave, Randy was talking to Tomei, and he even got to know Mark Lester since it was about an hour and 10-minute drive to the O2.
People have been waiting for hours there at Tito.
That's right, and the King of Pop is about an hour late for his own press conference, but that hasn't disappointed fans. There's about, well, I'd say over 500 people in this crowd. Some of them diehard Michael Jackson fans, some of them wearing Michael Jackson jackets, t-shirts. There's a sign that says, "We'll love you forever." So as you can see, Michael Jackson still has a base here, and what's surprising is that a lot of these are teenagers.
So we got there, rushed through traffic.
Once everyone arrived at the O2, Michael would go backstage along with Randy, Tomei, and Alberto. Paul Gongaware was also back there waiting. According to Paul's 2013 trial testimony, he saw me and he came up to me and he gave me a big hug and he whispered in my ear and he said, "Make sure the teleprompter has big words. I don't have my glasses." In court, when he asked if Michael was inebriated, drunk, smelled of alcohol, or seemed altered in any way, he answered no to all the questions. He said he thought MJ was good and he seemed excited.
Did Randy ever tell you that Michael was drunk and despondent before that press conference?
No, not drunk and despondent.
Did he say something else?
He just said he was having a hard time getting him going.
And did he explain that further?
No.
Did you have an understanding of what he meant?
No, I was just too busy at the press conference.
Another one, thank you. While MJ was getting ready to go on stage, Randy had to quickly write down what MJ was going to say. MJ was supposed to write his remarks the night before, but hadn't.
So we got there, rushed through traffic, and I didn't have time to write what he was going to say in the teleprompter, so I only got to write like 3 lines. So when you look at the press conference, you go on YouTube and look at it, March 5th, 2009, and he kept repeating the same 3 sentences, because that's all that was in the teleprompter.
Before I get into what was happening at the O2 Arena while Randy Phillips was trying to get MJ ready and the actual press conference itself, there's one more thing I need to bring up.
Why?
I know. I can feel my audience retention dipping as I speak. In Jermaine Jackson's book, You Are Not Alone, Michael Through a Brother's Eyes, he states the reason for Michael's odd demeanor on stage and lateness to the press conference is because earlier in the day on March 5th, he lost his dear friend and guitarist, David Williams. When my brother took to the This Is It podium to make his comeback announcement in London, I knew, watching in LA, that he was teasing the final curtain, but also that something wasn't quite right with him. His demeanor and lateness that afternoon also caused comment in the press. There was speculation, too, as to why he had appeared for only 5 minutes, with some claiming he was having second thoughts. That was simply not true. Earlier the same day, Michael had learned that his dearest friend and guitarist, David Williams, had died. He was shattered. David was an integral part of his signature sound, especially that guitar lick on Billie Jean. He was one of those rare guitarists who can just lock into a groove. He pulled himself together and put on a show face for 5 brave minutes. He walked out as the overexcited performer, said his piece, saluted his fans, and left with a wave. However, he broke down in tears when he returned to his suite. Now, it is true that David Williams passed away. However, according to multiple online sources, he suffered a stroke on March 2nd and unfortunately went into a coma. On March 6, 2009, he would pass away after going into cardiac arrest. I'm not saying that Jermaine is being dishonest, as we do have to account for the 8-hour time difference between England and California. What I am saying is that the grieving could have been a layer on top of the horrible treatment he received from Randy Phillips prior to arriving at the O2 Arena. Hence, his quote-unquote off demeanor and the rushed announcement, making this whole fiasco all the more heartbreaking. Now, I'm going to turn this over to the lovely Charlies, who are going to go into detail about their time at the O2 waiting for Michael to arrive, as well as the press conference itself. British investigative journalist Charles Thomson was in the press section, and Charlie Carter from the MJCast was down with the rest of the fans, so you'll be able to hear two unique perspectives. Once again, I want to give them a special thanks for allowing me to interview them. I'd also like to give a special thanks to my friend Dean, who was a longtime MJ fan and allowed me to pick his brain about what the MJ world was like around this time in 2009. Let's begin.
So my experience of the press conference began a few days before, actually, because at the time I was working as a freelance journalist with, I was known for Michael Jackson stuff, and I got a phone call. It was a couple of days before I got a phone call from somebody in Camp MJ, and they said, Michael is on a plane right now, and he wants the following information to be leaked. And they told me what flight he was on, what airstrip he was landing at, and what hotel he would be going to, and that he was coming to London to announce some concerts, and that he wanted his fans to be waiting to greet him. So, passed the information on. I made sure it got out into the fan community, and also gave it to the Sun newspaper in the UK, and they sent a photographer down. The photographer was the only person there, got the pictures of Michael descending the plane steps when he landed in the UK. Of course, I now suspect that Michael did not want that information leaked, and what was actually going on was the concert organizers wanted it leaked. Michael had previously been supposed to come to London about 2 weeks earlier to make the same announcement, and had ghosted AEG. And the whole thing had to be cancelled at the last minute. Luckily, they hadn't announced it yet. So once they knew he was on the plane, I think they wanted it leaked. But anyway, so that happened. Then I got put onto the press list for the press conference. So within the arena, there were 3 sections. There was the front section, like a gold circle, and that was reserved for something like the first 100 fans that got there, or something like that, the first 200, something along those lines. And then behind them, there was a press pen. And behind the press pen was the rest of the fans. So as press, we all had to enter through a different entrance, and we got filtered into the nightclub at the O2, which is called the Indigo 2, and we were all kept there for quite a long time. I don't remember the timings, like what time Michael was supposed to come out and make the announcement, but I remember that he was extremely late. The press were all being held in this nightclub in the middle of the day. Everybody was pissed off because it was running so late, and the organizers, you could tell that something was wrong. The organizers were looking extremely stressed and panicked. They kept saying, oh, it will happen soon, it will happen soon. Nothing was happening. Eventually, they did take us out to the press pen, but even then, once we were there for absolutely ages before Michael came out. I think there was at least one false start where we thought he was coming and then he didn't. There was a bit of angst between the fans and the press when we all got led out of the Indigo 2 and into the press pen. The fans started booing at us, and I'd met a really nice young reporter in the Indigo 2. She'd just got her first job in journalism, and she was saying to us, oh my god, I can't believe it, I love Michael Jackson so much, I grew up on Michael Jackson, I can't believe that I've got this job, and one of the first things I've been sent to do is go to this press conference, and it's Michael Jackson. I'm just ecstatic. And then when we went out, when we got led out to the press area, some of the fans started screaming at her that she was a tabloid bitch and scum and all this stuff, and she ended up in tears. We all got booed because we were in the press pen. And then, but I did overhear some interesting comments. I mean, I overheard one broadsheet journalist referring to Michael as a child molester behind me, so it was clear that some of the fans' antagonism was not wrong-headed. And then I remember at some point Dermot O'Leary coming out on stage and apologizing to everyone for the massive delay and saying, "We promise Michael will be coming. Something's, we don't know what's happening, but he's coming." And then eventually they put the screens on and we saw Michael getting off the bus, that moment that you see in the film. Except in the film, he gets off the bus and then he walks on stage, but what actually happened in the arena was he got off the bus, then the screens went off, and then it was about another 5 minutes of everyone just standing around and nothing happening, and then Michael finally appeared.
For me, I was in London completely by accident. So I used to hang out with a group of friends from where I'm from in the southwest of England, in Devon. And one of those friends is originally from London, and we'd sort of been organising, or a few months previously, we'd gone up to London as part of a charity fundraising thing where we're trying to raise money for, I can't remember which charity. The girls were dressed up as bees. They were dressed up as bees, and I was dressed up as a beekeeper, and walking around all these different destinations in London, basically shaking a tin and trying to raise money for this charity. And as a result of that, I said to one of my friends on that trip, Jodie, we should organise a trip and she can show me around. And we did that, and we just happened to arrange it for a few days in March of 2009. So we arranged this trip, and I think the day before we got on the train from Newton Abbot in Devon to go up to London, we got wind that there was a possibility that Michael Jackson might be in town to announce a show. And we went, all right, well, we'll keep an ear out for this. And on the day in question, it had sort of been confirmed somehow that he was doing this press conference, and there were posters all around London and in the different places that we were going advertising Thriller Live. So we saw all these posters, Michael Jackson might be coming to town. And when we found out that he was going to be doing a press conference at the O2 Arena, formerly known as the Millennium Dome, and that he would be arriving at, or doing the speech at 4 o'clock, and we were advised to get there at 1 o'clock, lunchtime. So Jodie and I sort of went, well, screw that, we're not getting there 3 hours early. So we went to Great Portland Street and got a pub lunch, and then got on the Jubilee line out to the O2, and we got there at about 5 to 4. And you can see all the "This Is It" posters and stuff like that had been hastily erected outside the O2. And we got into the foyer, and it was busy, but it wasn't full at the time we got there. So we got there 5 minutes before he was supposed to come out on stage. And we got into the crowd close enough that I could have thrown a tennis ball easily and got it onto the stage. And we were just to the right of where the press pen was, and where Charlie would have been. And yeah, we just stood there and waited. And it became apparent that he was running late. And then we heard through text messages from different people that it was on the news that he'd just left the hotel, so he could be another half an hour. And then, as Charlie said, O'Leary came up on stage and made some excuse about he's on his way, or he's stuck in traffic, or you know what London traffic is like, and he'll be here soon. And they ran a couple of the video montages up on the big screen to the side of the stage, what we now know as Brace Yourself. And yeah, like Charlie said, the video came of him getting off the bus, and then we obviously now know that he jumped into a golf cart and was making his way through the halls of the O2 backstage for a good 5 minutes or so before he actually appeared on stage. And Charlie also mentioned the false starts. There were a couple of false starts. I may or may not have been responsible for one of them, because at one stage during the waiting period, Jodie and I were just sort of looking around, and I saw a movement on the curtain, and I sort of jokingly went, "Oh, here he comes." And the person next to me started whooping and hollering, and that set the person off next to them, and then that started off the rest of the crowd. So I inadvertently was probably responsible for that. At one stage, someone, like a girl behind me, tried jumping on my back to get a better view, and I was sort of like, "What are you doing?" Yeah, anyway, he was about an hour and a half late, and he spoke for 3 minutes.
Thank you all. These will be my final show performances in London. This will be it. This is it. And when I say this is it, it really means this is it. Because I'll be performing the songs my fans want to hear. This is it. I mean, this is really it. This is the final curtain call. Okay? And I'll see you in July. I love you. I really do. You have to know that. I love you so much. Really. From the bottom of my heart. This is it. And see you in July.
Now, as we enter our discussion of the press conference itself, there are two specific questions I made sure to ask. The first being, as a final nail in the coffin, I asked both the Charlies if they thought MJ seemed drunk or despondent. With them being able to view it live, they surely would have noticed any off behavior from Michael. I also asked my friend Dean for his thoughts, even though he only saw it on TV after it had happened. The second question, of course, as shocking as it may seem, I asked all three of them if they actually believed that it was Michael Jackson at that podium. I can't tell you the amount of fans that actually believe that was not Michael Jackson, but an impersonator. And just so y'all know I'm not lying, I pulled the oldest comments from a press conference video with over 6.1 million views that was posted on March 5th, 2009. So many fans were concerned that that was not Michael. Alright, so what's the tea? Did MJ seem drunk and despondent?
When I saw the press conference, I didn't think at all he looked ill or anything. Like, he just looked like Michael Jackson. Like, his face was beaming. I did think he looked a little bit thin, but there wasn't anything. I don't remember looking at him and thinking, oh, is he okay?
I didn't get the impression that he was drunk. That may have been an exaggeration from Randy Phillips. As far as despondent, he definitely, as I say, he seemed tetchy. There's just that one moment where he makes that comment where he says, these will be my final show performances in London, okay?
These will be my final show performances in London. This is it. I mean, this is really it. This is the final curtain call. Okay?
It's just, there's a sarcasm about it, there's a tetchiness about it, which sort of betrays his true feelings about what's going on, which is, I don't really want to be here. But drunk and despondent, I think he just wouldn't have allowed the public to see him looking drunk and despondent. But there was definitely an air of, I don't want to be here.
Yeah, I didn't necessarily think he was drunk per se. Despondent probably isn't the word I would have used. I think there was a nervousness about Michael, what he'd been through just a couple of years before in the trial. This was his first real public speech since the end of the trial. He'd done a couple of interviews with will.i.am and gone over to Japan and done that fan forum thing. But so he was speaking to the world here. Let's not forget there were news carriers around the world that were putting this press conference out live. The BBC certainly were. And so this was Michael Jackson talking to the English-speaking world and the wider world live for the first time since the end of his trial. I just think that he was nervous. He looked nervous to me. Drunk? No, not necessarily. I mean, I don't know how true the reports are that he was under the influence of alcohol in the lead up to it were, but there's a difference between being drunk and having a drink or two. I don't think he was drunk because he was able to walk in a straight line. Perhaps his behavior on the day was a little different than normal. Maybe he had a drink to calm his nerves. I don't think he was drunk though. He certainly wasn't falling over. And despondent, like I say, I'd probably use the word nervous or lacking in confidence rather than despondent.
And did you believe that it was MJ at that podium?
Yes, it was 100% him. Like, I can't even believe people think it wasn't him. And the reason being, because I'm a sucker for details, and I noticed little things. You could see it was him. The smile was exactly the same. His large hands were there. That was 100% Michael Jackson. 100% Michael Jackson. Anyone who says anything differently is crazy and needs to get in the bin.
Yes, 100,000%. And what I'd say to back that up is that you look at how many Michael Jackson impersonators there are around the world. How many of them actually look like Michael Jackson, especially at that stage of his life? And not only that, how many of them sound like Michael Jackson and move like Michael Jackson? I know every single Michael Jackson fan would look at an impersonator and go, yeah, it's good, but it's not quite Michael, right? So there is absolutely not a single shred of doubt in my mind that that was Michael Jackson on stage.
Well, also, what would be the point? I mean, I know Roger Moore in the old Bond films used to use a body double if he had to walk across a room, but what would be the point of Michael sending a body double to a press conference? I mean, it just doesn't... It's one of those conspiracy theories where you can't even understand what the logic is behind it. Like, okay, why would he do that? Why on earth would he do that? What would be the logic behind that? Why? You know what I mean? So I just don't... But no, I mean, of course, we know now that Randy Phillips was beating him up in the hotel beforehand, so, I mean, that wasn't a body double that was getting beaten up by Randy Phillips, that was Michael.
It's true, but he shouldn't say it.
So, yeah, it definitely was Michael.
Okay, and with that, back to our regularly scheduled discussion.
I do remember that the crowd in the O2 was absolutely cacophonous. I mean, you could not, it was unbelievable. It was so loud, you couldn't hear yourself think. People were going crazy.
I've never seen so many people go off their face for one person.
You have waited long enough. 750 million album sales, 13 Grammys. London welcomes the King of Pop, Mr. Michael Jackson.
An old friend of mine called Ryan Jagger. He was an up-and-coming artist back in the the late noughties, and he went to do it was in the early 2010s, the 2010s, and I think he went to do like a press shoot or something down in London, and he met Dermot O'Leary, and he's a huge MJ fan, and he said he asked him like, oh, you know, you met Michael Jackson, what was he like? And Dermot had apparently turned around and said like Michael was shaking the entire time. Like when he hugged him on stage, when Dermot hugged him on stage, he said he was absolutely shaking the entire time, and you could tell he was terrified. And I know he said beforehand apparently Michael was scared that nobody was going to turn up and like nobody was going to care, which I thought was quite interesting. So it was clear that Michael was just really scared because he, after everything that had gone on, he didn't know how people were going to receive him. And obviously it was a very good thing, you know, the crowds were there, people were going crazy, and everyone was just really happy to see him.
Thank you all.
It was the first time I'd seen Michael in the flesh. Was an hour and a half late, spoke for 3 minutes, but I've never seen so many people react the way they did. And after he disappeared, because he didn't really confirm any details of what the tour was going to be, other than he's going to be performing the songs his fans wanted to hear. We didn't know when really, other than July, and how many shows. And then when he disappeared, Dermot O'Leary came back on stage and said, oh, you can pre-register for tickets through this number. And so my scramble was to register for those tickets, send as many text messages as I could from different people's phones, and register different email addresses to try and get the pre-sale tickets. And then my phone battery died, so it was on with the rest of our day and our night out in central London after that.
And there we go. Thank you very much one more time, ladies and gentlemen. The King of Pop, Michael Jackson!
And then he disappeared, and that was it. We went back to the Indigo 2, and then we got taken up to some VIP bar or something, and I was sat right next to Dermot O'Leary, but I didn't say anything to him. And then I went downstairs, I left the press area, and went to meet some of my fan friends in a restaurant in the O2 complex. There was about 6 or 7 of us there, and there was kind of a weird atmosphere. Everybody at dinner was a bit, I don't know, there was just some fog hanging in the air, some weirdness. And then my friend Amanda just said something wasn't right today, so something was wrong. I've got a bad feeling. And it was like someone had popped this balloon. It was like everybody just went, oh my God, I'm so glad you said that. We all felt it. It's hard to explain what the sensation was, because it was a sensation. It was just a sense of unease. I think part of it was knowing Michael and knowing that he hated performing, knowing that he hated touring, and that he would not be doing this if he had any choice. There is only one reason he would be doing this, and it's because he has to do it. There was a sort of a guilt associated with being there, because you knew that although you really wanted to see a Michael Jackson concert, at the same time you knew Michael Jackson did not want to be performing that concert. And then also the knowledge that over the previous decade or so, pretty much everything that he announced never came to fruition. You know, he would tell you that, you know, he announced the Millennium concerts, they went by the wayside. There was one point where he announced he was going to do a tour of Africa to raise money for AIDS assistance, and then that never happened. Constantly, like the Katrina single announced, never happened. He'd get up and make speeches and say the best is yet to come and then not do anything. So there was also a sense of, is this even going to happen? It seemed so unlikely. It just seemed so spectacularly unlikely that it would actually happen. It seemed far more likely that he would sign the contract, announce it, then pull out and get sued. That was sort of like odds on that's what's going to happen. You know, I've got like 2-1 on Michael pulling out and getting sued, or 7-1 on Michael actually performing the concerts. There's no question that Michael was doing these concerts for one reason and one reason alone, and that is because he needed the money. That's it. He was backed into a corner and he needed to do it because otherwise he was looking at financial disaster. All of that stuff, even at the time, we all knew that was bullshit. You just knew it was bullshit because he'd already told us. I mean, we'd all seen the Private Home movies in 2003, you know, where he talked about how much he hated touring.
The record company usually like for you to support your album and go on tour, and I don't like to.
Well, can we just do it again without the negative, saying that you don't like the tour? Just 'cause
I don't like it though.
I know, but see,
I go through hell. I go through hell touring.
We'd all read Adrian Grant's book from the history era called Making History, where Michael actually said after the history tour, I'm never going to do long series of concerts again. I might do one concert here and one concert there, but that's going to be it. So we all knew that he had no interest in doing this and that he was only doing it because his back was up against the wall. So yeah, I mean, all that stuff from AEG about how keen Michael was and how he was really looking forward to, and Kenny Ortega was doing a lot of that bullshit as well. It was just, we all knew it was bullshit. But there was just something about his demeanor as well that you just didn't feel like he genuinely wanted to be there. And there was one moment where he was talking and he said,
"These will be my final show performances in London."
These will be my final show performances in London. Okay?
Okay?
He said, okay, like that.
Okay?
It was almost like, is that what you wanted? Are you satisfied now? That was kind of the vibe he was giving off. These will be my final show performances in London. Okay? And it was just like, oh man, he kind of is acting like he's pissed off with us. Like, oh, if this is what you want, then I'll do it, but I'm going to make it clear that I'm doing it under duress. It was that kind of vibe that he was giving off. Those are my overwhelming memories from the press conference.
My experience would have been different to yours because I was completely outside of the fan community at that time. I didn't engage or wasn't even aware of any of the forums like MJJ Source or any of that. So all I had to know about Michael was the stuff that I had either watched or researched and things like that. Now, you mentioned a minute ago that we had the home videos where he said, he doesn't like touring and changing time zones and things like that. And I thought to myself, and you've got to remember that this is in the context of Michael almost being completely in the wilderness for the previous 3.5 to 4 years since the trial. And I sort of was taken in by okay, this is his great comeback. You can't keep someone who is that prolific and that legendary and that good at singing and making music away for too long. There's going to be a comeback. He can't have the final chapter of his story be, coming out of a trial being found not guilty of child molestation, but with the world's media still doubting it despite the facts, right? So I thought that there was an element of this comeback that was, okay, we're going to make the Michael Jackson story about the triumphant return of this absolute music legend. There was some trepidation, of course, because let's face it, he's 50 years old. He's not the spring chicken and the absolutely stratospheric figure that he was before the allegations broke in 1993. But I agree with what Charlie said about just something didn't quite feel right. And I don't think it was any of the things that I just mentioned a minute ago. Him obviously having got older and, all the rumors around about his potential health and his well-being. I did get the sense when he was on the stage, though, that I took him on his word that, he was going to be performing the songs that his fans wanted to hear. But in the back of your mind, the whole I don't like to tour, okay, well, that's why he's doing them all here, all in London. He's going to base himself at one place. He doesn't have to worry about moving through time zones, and he can base himself at one place. But then that same sentence that Charlie mentioned a minute ago, where he said these will be my final show performances in London, I took that to mean, okay, well, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the last shows he'll ever do, full stop. It just means they'll be the last ones he does here in the UK. Is he going to go and do some in the States? Is he going to go and do some in France or Japan or wherever it might be? Is this actually a tour but with a residency at each location? Of course, we never got to find out what the full plan was going to be. But the other factor that we later found out was that part of his reason for wanting to do the shows the way he did in London was to beat a record that had been held by Prince of the number of consecutive shows to have been done in a residency at the O2. But back to the day itself, there was a little bit of trepidation of, can this guy who's 50 years old really still moonwalk and put the energy into the performances that he did on previous tours? Can he still do it? And I firmly believed at that point that he could, because I wasn't fully aware of all the facts that we have, now come to know since his passing.
He honestly was crying. I could hear it in his voice. He was choked up. That I don't think until he walked out on the stage of that press conference and he saw all those fans, I don't think he knew himself. Because remember, at the end of the day, he's just a person. Forget all the press and the weird stories and the flesh-eating this and all that stuff. Underlying that persona is a person. And I think with the same insecurities we all have, and I think he was absolutely, I shouldn't say think, I know, he was absolutely blown away by the reaction.
When you think about it, it's truly unbelievable what MJ went through for a press conference when he was on stage for, as Charlie said, a total of 3 minutes. This man was, allegedly, slapped, thrown into a shower, and screamed at, not to mention belittled in emails to Randy Phillips' colleagues and tyrannized by the British press. But what else is new on that front? Right? Despite nervousness, delays and all, Michael Jackson did what AEG, numerous fans, and maybe even himself deemed impossible. He announced his comeback, and to say it was a huge success is an understatement. But as Paul Gongaware stated in his February 27th emails with Randy Phillips, once we go on sale, which we have the right to do, he is locked. He has no choice, he has to do it. Before we discuss the unprecedented frenzy that was trying to secure This Is It concert tickets, let's talk about what happened following the press conference. On March 6, 2009, fans were able to pre-register to participate in the pre-sale for concert tickets on MichaelJacksonLive.com. According to Mike Smallcomb, per his book Making Michael, the site struggled to cope as 1.6 million people registered, enough to fill the O2 Arena more than 100 times, so AEG quickly added 20 more shows for a total of 30. Only fans who registered were able to buy tickets priced between £50 and £75 when the pre-sale began, which in United States dollars, according to Google, is $65.24 and $97.85, according to the value of the US dollar in 2024, which is very cheap in today's day and age. You're telling me I could have had the chance to see the Hee Man for like $100 in 2009? Why was I so busy watching Hannah Montana and throwing up over Nick Jonas's curls instead of slinging McChickens for a jet? Hey, that'll work. It's what a man's supposed to do. Because of the amount of people that registered for the pre-sale between March 6th and March 7th, Randy realized they were going to need to add more shows.
And I had to call him yesterday and say, Mike, we may have to add 20 more shows, and we're still not going to come close to fulfilling the demand.
I mean, the tickets weren't even printed yet, and people were already selling them on eBay for $450 a pop. But let's put a pin in that and come back to it later. Continuing our discussion of March 6th, MJ, his children, Randy Phillips, Dave Loeffler, Dr. Tomei, Mark Lester, and his family went to see Oliver Twist the musical on the West End in London at the Theatre Royal Drury Lane. As soon as MJ arrived, there was pandemonium because someone had leaked that he would be there. Gee, I wonder who did that. According to Untouchable by Randall Sullivan, it was Dr. Tomei. I leaked it to the media when we were going, Tomei said. I wanted the public to know Michael will be there, because I wanted Michael to get his oxygen back. I want him to know how much he is loved. I told the PR people working with me to leak it everywhere, to make sure his fans will know. But even I can't believe what it's like. There are thousands and thousands of people at the theater when we arrive. It was unbelievable how they reacted when they saw him coming. The love, I never saw anything like it. Michael is so happy. He cannot stop smiling. And the kids, they were shocked. They'd never seen this before. Not like that. It's like they finally know who their father is. Randy stated when they all walked in, MJ received a standing ovation. But as they were leaving, it got crazy. Apparently, there were policemen on horses, and they couldn't even get their van out because there were thousands of people in the streets.
It was like Michaelmania. All over the press. I mean, some of the papers put it on the front page with the headlines like "The King is back." The posters for the concerts were at every tube station. When he went to the theatre the day after, maybe he got completely mobbed.
Thousands flocked to the West End, desperate to see him as he entered the Theatre Royal, a trip to see the musical Oliver with his children turning to mayhem. Fans and the paparazzi craned from every angle, using all inches of space available to catch that all-important shot.
Reliving the 80s all over again, just fantastic. I've got fond memories of that, and it's just the whole thing's happening all over again. It's like dream come true for everyone.
Yeah, that phrase is perfect description of it. It was like being back in the, the bad or dangerous eras where, people thought that this guy was so stratospheric that no one could touch him. And it was almost as if people were remembering what this guy used to be and the effect that he could have on large crowds.
I couldn't see his kids, and he was scared. I could see in his face he was scared because it was getting too mad. So I just backed off. It was too mad in there. The crowd just reacted really crazy, as they always do, and the police had to do what they are here to do, is protect him and his kids.
In the immediate aftermath of the announcement of the tour, it was like the media had remembered that as well. They remembered how good this guy was, and they're sort of, promoting him.
Of what's to come this summer, perhaps their last chance to see him in concert at the O2 Arena in July. Sarah Jane Mee, Sky News.
Although there was a lot of good from Michael staging his triumphant return, there were an equal amount of people that were concerned, especially once those shows went from 10 to 50. For one thing, Randy had said in an email to a colleague that the prospect of having to get Michael on stage was scary, literally stating, "We underestimated the demand. Now I have to get him on stage. Scary." According to an article from The Telegraph posted on March 14, 2009, titled, "Michael Jackson's promoter is making all the right moves," Randy told the reporter, "If Mike gets too nervous to go on, I'll throw him over my shoulder and carry him on stage. He's light enough. Uncle Phil, why don't you handle this one?" Thank you.
The sales were record-breaking, of course. The 10 concerts became 31, became 50, with enough people still in the queue to sell out another 50. It was massive. It was like Michaelmania all over again. But then, slowly over the following months, you saw the media coverage start to turn again, and it was, he's got skin cancer, he's got a flesh-eating disease in his face, there's rumours that he's going to be using a body double, and that he's only going to be on stage for 13 minutes, and blah blah blah. It all started to turn into the whole wacko jacko type stuff again. I think for me it was certainly a huge amount of skepticism as to whether it would ever happen. The nearer it got the more you started to think maybe it will happen, but not enough that I was prepared to go around buying tickets unless I knew I could get a refund on them. Michael was re-emerging into a very different world from the one he'd retreated from after the last time he'd gone on tour, and I thought that there was a very... we all knew the media would be gunning for him. There was no question the media would be gunning for him. So I was worried about what was going to happen when he took the stage, if he got on stage. There was the constant stress and anxiety in the back of your mind about, is he going to cancel, which you don't get with anyone else. I mean, you didn't book tickets to a Prince concert and think, is he going to cancel? You know, it's only Michael that has that reputation for cancelling all his concerts, and so you were sort of every day, it was almost like watching the calendar, and every time you got to the end of a day and the concerts hadn't been cancelled, it was like, okay, that's another day nearer, and it's not gone wrong yet.
As Charlie said, as we got closer to the shows, and like I said, with the delays of the shows, the British media never needs a chance to shit on Michael Jackson. They never need to be asked a second time to produce a negative story on Michael Jackson. There was a lot of excitement, but at the same time, I found that there were equal numbers of people saying, he won't do it, you know, or had been coloured by the trial, who wouldn't research facts in the same way that we would as fans. So they still thought that this guy had basically done an O.J. Simpson and got out of jail for a crime he committed, which just wasn't the case. So there was a lot of love for Michael Jackson within the general public, but there was also a fairly vocal section of the public and the media that just didn't want this guy to succeed or be anything anymore. Am I going to get in trouble for that OJ comment?
No.
Good.
On March 8th, Michael Jackson and his entourage would fly back to Los Angeles. Meanwhile, some emails would be exchanged between Randy Phillips and Jim Morey, Michael Jackson's former manager in the late 1980s into the early 1990s. The two would briefly talk about a tour Randy was working on for Miley Cyrus at the time. For those wondering, it would have been the Wonderworld tour. And then began talking about the press conference. Randy stated, MJ was not speaking to Dr. Tomei because of the stupid auction setup that MJ never agreed to until the day they left for London on the Gulfstream I chartered. The fact that the press conference even happened is a miracle, let alone getting through the unprecedented demand for shows that has caught us off guard. Now, let's talk about that unprecedented demand, shall we?
Initially, when it was first announced, when it said 10 shows, straight away in my head I was like, I'm never going to see them, they're going to sell out. And then when they announced it was 50 concerts, selfishly I was like, oh, maybe I actually have a chance to get a ticket now because there's more shows. And I think that was, at least over here, that was kind of like the general mood. There was sort of rumblings in the press about like, oh, 50 shows, is he going to do it? But I think at the time everyone was still so excited that Michael was coming back that no one really thought about it. At least I didn't think about it. It was just more of a, oh, there's more dates, I could potentially go and see him now.
As I said earlier, because of the amount of pre-registers for tickets, ultimately the 10 shows will be up to 50, which we talked about at the beginning of the video, covering Michael's AEG agreement from January 2009. Now y'all see why I spent all that time talking about it,
So using things such as, you know, his ego to try and convince him to break Prince's record, you know, saying that we'll do this residency in London so that you don't have to travel around. We can put you up in a house that you can go back to after each show and spend the time with your kids that you want to spend. And you don't have to worry about, you know, jet lag or anything like that. Probably appealed to his ego and his sense of, his sense of responsibility to give his fans one last big show performance. After what he went through in 2005, he just wasn't the same man. So that's why I think that there was possibly an attitude of, can he pull this off around the world?
With that, on March 11th, the 2-day pre-sale for the This Is It shows began. Tickets went on sale at 7 a.m., with the 10 shows in July going up first. Fans were limited to 4 tickets per household at a cost of up to $105 for general admission. VIP tickets costed up to $1,100. You're telling me I could have paid $1,100 in 2009 for VIP tickets to a Hee Hee Man show, when most of his understudies today are charging more than that just for general admission? Excuse me while I have a Mick breakdown. A lot of fans were upset about the ticket cap, as well as other issues. Per Talitha Linehand's book, A Real-Life Fairy Tale, Michael Jackson and Me, for one thing, buyers were limited to purchasing a maximum of 4 tickets for the entire tour, whereas most fans wanted to go far more than 4 concerts, some to all 50 if possible. Some fans had found ways around this by using a second credit card with a different address, for example, but not everyone had access to such resources. Another problem was that most tickets, especially to the coveted front rows of the venue, which was to be entirely seated, didn't go on sale directly to the public, but via a ticket resale agency called Viagogo, which was charging several £100s in some cases for tickets with a face value of £75. As a result, the front of the arena would likely not be occupied by mega fans as the front of Michael's previous venues had been, but by the wealthy people who could afford the steep purchase prices. In May of 2009, a few fans met with Michael at Center Staging, a studio in Burbank, California. Now we'll talk more about this meeting in part 3, but for now I just want to focus on what he said in regards to these concerns Talitha and other fans had voiced. Talitha stated in her book that MJ was not aware that the concerts were seated and that he was going to do something about it. He said they, AEG, did it without his consent and they did it for obvious reasons. For money, in case that wasn't obvious. That of course begs the question of, why didn't Michael know? After all, it was his show. His name was all over it. I'll leave you to ponder on that, because like I said, we'll talk about this meeting in part 3. See y'all in another 6 to 12 business months. Anyway, after the 10 shows sold out, they would roll into the next 11, totaling 21 shows, which means at this point, there would only be 10 left for the general public on sale on the 13th, since MJ at this time had only pre-approved up to 31 shows, according to Untouchable by Randall Sullivan. Minutes after the 2 websites selling the tickets went online, more than 1 million Jackson fans attempting to log on crashed them both. 2 hours after the sites were rebooted, 190,000 tickets had been sold. During the next 16 hours, all of the 300,000 plus seats available had been snapped up, and more than 1.5 million people who had tried but failed to purchase tickets were waiting for another chance.
Angry fans, website sent into meltdown. It's the kind of mayhem you'd expect when Jackomania really takes effect. Today, thousands of Michael Jackson fans who'd registered to buy pre-sale tickets for the star's upcoming string of shows were left frustrated as the website selling them crashed. Such is the demand to see the King of Pop play what are supposed to be his last ever London gigs at the city's O2 Arena. Pre-sale started at 7 a.m. this morning. Fans who had registered to apply for tickets today were given unique access codes from O2, but some who tried to log on were then faced with error messages or told their code wasn't recognised. Others had to bear long queues, then only to be told that all the pre-sale tickets were sold out. And that's despite organisers adding another 11 dates to the residency, bringing the total number of gigs to 21. Those planning to make a fast buck on the Jacko effect have already put their tickets up for sale on the auction website eBay. But if the prices there are too steep, there is still hope. All remaining tickets will go on sale to the general public this Friday at 7 a.m, although it seems an early start and persistence will be the key to success.
On March 12th, if you went to michaeljacksonlive.com, you would see the following message. We have now sold out of the pre-sale ticket allocation for 30 shows. Michael Jackson has agreed to add more shows, so you still have a chance to get tickets on pre-sale. We know that many of you have experienced frustrating delays so far, and we apologize for these problems. Demand for tickets is unprecedented, so please be patient and do keep trying. If you have not yet been successful in purchasing tickets with your code, it will still work. If you have registered but you haven't yet received a pre-sale code, there's still a chance you will receive one tomorrow, so keep your eyes peeled and keep checking your inbox. According to an article posted on March 12th titled Jackson Run at 50, Secondary Market Causes Issues, Randy stated, "We stopped it at 45 in the pre-sale to save shows for the public on sale, which is tomorrow," Phillips says. "There's potentially a 100 shows here. He could stay here as long as he wants to. We had to pick a number. This is a cultural phenomena." Phillips says allotments from each night of the first 45 shows also will be available to the general public, meaning those who did not pre-register for tickets. More than 90% of the tickets have been purchased from the UK, but the rest is France, Germany, Poland, everywhere in the world. People bought tickets from Botswana, Phillips says. The intensity of demand has been a shot of adrenaline for Jackson, Phillips says. He feels great. He feels reborn, Phillips adds. He's been gone for 12 years, so there was trepidation there. That's interesting because it's been alleged that somewhere between March 11th and the 13th, Randy Phillips said that MJ told him no more shows, stating he calls me all the time. We spoke Wednesday afternoon, and he said, Randy, no more shows, no more shows. After Michael said no more shows, AEG increased the number of shows first to 45 and then 50 without Michael's approval or knowledge. I will say that I do not have a source for this. I don't know exactly where it came from. Therefore, take this with a grain of salt because I don't know the origin. Don't shoot the messenger. LOVE. To continue the March 12th Billboard article, meanwhile, AEG Live cut a deal with European secondary market ticket seller Viagogo that has led to some issues. We met and got pitched by Viagogo and other secondary sellers, Seatwave and Get Me In. We thought Viagogo had the best pitch, so we decided to make them our authorized secondary on Michael, said Phillips. According to Phillips, AEG cut a deal with Viagogo to give fans access to premium seats, and the market would set the price on only a small percentage of the house every night. And secondly, to give fans a peer-to-peer platform where they know these tickets aren't counterfeited. Having said that, Viagogo did something really bad yesterday. We had no idea they were doing, Phillips continues. They sent out emails to brokers and touts all over London, offering them packages and seats and discounts. We're going into court tomorrow to get an injunction. All we want from them is their platform, their website for fans to buy tickets. Phillips said AEG lawyers in London will go to court tomorrow, March 13th, to get an injunction against Viagogo actually selling tickets. They've told us they won't, but I want to make sure it's in the public record, he said. Even if we don't get the injunction, that's not the point. I want them to be under notice publicly not to do that. It's about them living up to their word and the deal we cut. Representatives for Viagogo could not be reached for comment. On March 13th, all 50 tickets for the This Is It shows went on sale on Ticketmaster and sold out in less than 5 hours.
No fans can beat Michael Jackson fans for dedication, and they queued around the corner at the O2 Arena to make sure they got to see their hero. The tickets went on sale at 7 a.m. These two were at the very front of the queue.
We had rain, our tent got flooded, but just because we knew that we were going to see Michael, none of that stuff matters because we're here for Michael, we'll do anything.
Some people have been camping here since Wednesday to get their hands on tickets, but the reality is not everyone who's bought one will actually end up going to a concert. Tickets are already being sold on eBay, with one optimistic person hoping to make £50,000 for 4. But for some, there was disappointment and anger.
The Ticketmaster thing, got no joy, that's why I come down here. Queue up for 6 hours and then get told to go home. It's lovely, isn't it?
How we've been that close to getting one.
Yeah, that's not fair. Not fair.
For those who missed out, there are always those auction sites. But one thing's for sure, those tickets won't be cheap.
I actually got really lucky because I went on the website on the day and I was one of a few people who took advantage of a glitch where for a split second it let some people in early before the tickets had gone on sale. So I was able to get in and buy a pair of tickets before they'd even gone on sale, and then when the sale opened officially I was able to get in and buy a second pair of tickets, and then the first pair that I'd bought I gave to my parents. At the time, the big issue with the tickets that I recall, or the two big issues with the tickets that I recall, is number one, there was a cap. So across the entire run, there was a notice on the website that said there are only 4 tickets allowed per household across the entire run. And if we find out you bought more than 4 tickets, we'll cancel the difference. We'll cancel them. So a lot of fans were like, there were fans that obviously wanted to go to every single concert. So they were like, well, how am I going to do this if there's a ban on me having more than 4 tickets? The other issue was they said that the concerts had sold out, but then all of a sudden the black market, places like Viagogo, were filled with great tickets at very high prices. An investigation by the Times newspaper discovered that AEG had never put some of the tickets on sale, and they were posing as fans on these resale websites, and they were selling tickets straight onto the black market at inflated rates. Now, their response to that was they tried to act like they hadn't done anything wrong. Their statement was something like, it would be ridiculous to suggest that there is not a premium market for a Michael Jackson concert. There's nothing wrong with what we're doing, but that completely ignored the fact that they were already premium tickets. They were already selling VIP packages for very large amounts of money, like front row seats as VIP packages, and then these were specifically being sold as resale tickets on resale websites. Of course, now we know they do it with everything, but at the time it was a big revelation, and people were really pissed off. The only other thing I really recall about tickets is I was unconfident enough that I refused to buy tickets from anywhere that would not provide me with a guarantee that if the concert got cancelled I would be refunded. I was not convinced that any of these concerts were ever going to happen, just based on my experience of Michael over the years and how flaky he could be, and particularly in his final decade, how flaky he became, and his reputation for welshing on contracts and then getting sued.
I managed to successfully register for the pre-sale. The only issue I really had in being able to book them, because they came online, I believe at something like 9 o'clock in the morning was when the website was supposed to come online. The only real issue I had was trying to get that day off work. In the end, they let me take the day off to be able to secure these tickets. But anyway, I did purchase the 4 tickets. I remember the cap. I tried to get around that by registering multiple email addresses, but in the end, only one of them came through with the pre-sale code anyway. The friends I was going with also did the same. They also registered for the pre-sale, but I only got the one email address that got a code, and they didn't get a code. So I booked the 4 tickets, and I think it was something like £75 a ticket from memory, which I thought was bloody expensive, but you know, at the end of the day, it's Michael Jackson.
With the tickets finally out to the general public, preparations for the tour began immediately. Rehearsals would start up by the end of the month, and what I've dubbed Team MJ would start to assemble. One of the first people MJ would hire on would be the High School Musical / Hocus Pocus legend, choreographer, and director Kenny Ortega, who I'll talk more about in a second. On March 16th, Michael would go to Sony Studios to view a special effects demonstration. According to Paul Gongaware's AEG trial testimony, it had 3D on LEDs, and that had never been done before at that time, and pyrotechnics, which MJ loved. You can actually see this exact scene in the This Is It film. There was even a water fountain effect that was shown to him but not used. Randy Phillips, I believe, talked about it here.
Kenny Ortega, the famous director, choreographer, he was the show director. I was the promoter producer for This Is It. We made the movie that was the highest grossing concert movie of all time. So anyway, we're getting ready to go to London. I'm $36 million in the hole on the production for This Is It, which was astronomical. Michael asked for a meeting at his home with Kenny and me. This is a home I was paying $100,000 a month for rent. So Kenny and I meet with Michael in his living room in the house, and he says, "Randy, Kenny,
you gotta love the voice.
I want to create Victoria Falls in the arena." Now, mind you, Victoria Falls, he wanted water, like water coming down from the ceiling of the arena, which is about 100 feet high.
That's reasonable to ask.
Well, I did it for Britney Spears on her first tour. So I actually had a history with running water, So he wanted Victoria Falls. The only problem is we were opening in 3 weeks. So there was no time, there was no budget, there was nothing. So Kenny says to Michael, he says, Michael, we can't do this. We don't have enough time, and we've got all our gags, and we've got all the stuff, the 3D, the this, okay? We just don't have time to do this, and I don't want to shortchange Victoria Falls. Michael goes, "But Kenny, you don't understand. God gives me these ideas at night, and if I don't do it, he's just going to give it to Prince."
On March 17th, Paul Gongaware would send an email to Michael Jackson's assistant, who I believe at this time was Michaelmania Williams, also known as Brother Michael. But it also could have been Evie, but she was Michael's personal administrative assistant. Don't quote me. Anyway, Paul wanted a meeting held between Michael and Kenny only. He stated the reason for that was that they were the creative forces needed to find the show's path before including everyone else. It seems like a harmless occurrence, but it could be that Paul wanted Kenny to sort of watch out for Michael and potentially his health. It's kind of giving, como se dice, double agent, if you want to get all conspiracy about it. When Paul was asked about this in court, he said that no one at AEG had asked him to do that. He thought Ortega watched out for him because they were friends and worked together. With the tickets going on sale 4 days prior, concerns about Michael's health this early are a bit alarming. But were they justified? Let's put a pin in that for a second. Also on March 17th, Paul was already making plans in case MJ gave the okay to extend the tour. Promoters had sent in emails from India and Australia. Randy Phillips had sent an email to Paul on March 18th stating, "We have a 4-year plan that includes Australia. However, we have to finish London first." Paul Gongaware, who apparently had a disdain for the Australian promoters, said, "Over my dead body, but let's see what he says before I piss on his parade."
Okay.
On March 19th and March 23rd, Michael would take trips to his dermatologist, Dr. Arnold Klein's office. We talked about Dr. Klein back in part 1. Now, this is not a new occurrence, as MJ had been seeing Dr. Klein for decades. But I bring this up to circle back to what I said earlier about concerns about Michael's health being justified. Michael went from these 2 appointments in March to quadruple that in April 2009 with 12 appointments, most of these occurring in the span of a week, for the entire month. When he would leave from these appointments, he always seemed a bit groggy. MJ's manager at some point revealed a bill for $48,000 from Klein. Now, the majority of these treatments listed in the bill were cosmetic drugs like Restylane and Botox. MJ really wanted to look his best for these shows, and even Lou Ferrigno, who personal trained MJ on the History Tour as well as in preparation for the This Is It tour, said the same thing.
Wanted to develop his shoulders more. He wanted to have more of that V-taper because he wanted to come back as the new Michael, and he wanted to restructure his whole body.
But with Dr. Klein in particular, I do believe he was receiving Demerol, as there were unidentified intramuscular shots listed in the bill. Or, as Randy said here,
No, Michael Caine told me that he had a bill for $48,000, and it was pages of treatments, Restylane, all of this, Botox, Restylane, and then something called DM, or IM, something like that, I don't remember.
DM as in Demerol?
Or I don't think it was DM, I think it was IM.
It was Demerol DM or Demerol IM, which IM, or intramuscularly, just means an injection within or into muscle, like the arm muscle, thigh muscle, or glutes. A doctor may opt for this if a drug is irritating to the veins, if they are unable to find a vein, or solely because it allows medication to be absorbed into the bloodstream faster. Klein stated during his treatments with MJ that he would have to do several tiny injections on his face, very close to his eyes and around his nose, as he was trying to restructure MJ's face. So he would have sedated him, as it would be painful and discomforting for him to be awake for that.
I administer Demerol because you have to understand that the procedure I do are painful injections. And I would give him, I would say I would take an hour and a half to inject him. And I would do somewhere around, well over 100 facial injections on him. And unless I sedated him, he was very, believe it or not, needle phobic when you got to needles on his face. It's really a painful procedure. So, I mean, you had to stop him from squirming. You had to go to his eyes. The scalp injections were very, very painful, which I had to do. Because also I had to reduce a great deal of scarring on him. So what I used drugs for was not to give him drugs. I mean, these drugs to relieve the pain when I did a procedure.
At some point, it would become known to AEG that, as stated in a June 2009 email, Klein scared them to death because he was shooting him, MJ, up with something.
Mr. Caine was Mr. Jackson's business manager eventually, is that correct?
That is correct.
And he sends you an email on June 23 at 11:22 asking on the list of doctors that will help get up from today to the opening night. Where does Arnold Klein stand on the list? Correct. Probably up was us. Should have been us.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And what was your response?
He scares us to death because he's shooting him up with something.
But I'm jumping ahead here. At this point in our timeline, I don't believe there was anything to worry about as far as Michael's health or any drug use. The main concern people had was that he seemed a little thin, but it was March. He still had a few months to put on weight and get himself in touring shape. Now on March 25th, a set of very telling emails were sent. Randy Phillips told Paul Gongaware, "We need to pull the plug now. I will explain." Paul denied the email was in reference to calling off the tour, but said it had to do with pulling the plug on Michael's makeup artist, Karen Faye, who seemingly early on expressed fears about Michael's poor health. He said Kenny Ortega felt like Karen would try to control access to Michael and that he didn't like that. I mean, Karen does seem to always try to be the Michael Jackson whisperer. In another email, Kenny wrote to Paul stating it was Karen's strong opinion that this is dangerous and impractical with consideration to MJ's health and ability to perform. Again, tickets went on sale a few weeks prior, and we're already having concerns about Michael Jackson's health and ability to do these shows, but AEG claimed they didn't know anything was wrong with Michael after he died. Okay. Sometime also during this month is when Paul Gongaware would tell his secretary in an email to design a concert calendar for MJ using light tan colors for show dates while drawing attention to his rest days. He stated, "Don't want the shows to stand out too much when Michael looks at it. Less contrast between work and off. Maybe off days in a contrasting soft color. Put off in each off day after July 8th as well. Figure it out so it looks like he's not working so much." I believe I showed this clip from his deposition early in the video. In regards to this, of course, Paul said it it would be obvious when Michael would be working and not, and he wasn't trying to trick him.
This is for
Paul Gongaware.
you big, fat, white, nasty, smelling, fat bitch.
On March 28th, Michael would go to center staging with Kenny Ortega and his longtime choreographer Travis Payne to start rehearsals for This Is It. That concludes our first act. But don't worry, darling, we've still got a lot of ground to cover. Our tale is far from over. In this act, we learned about how the deal for the This Is It shows came together and the flock of vultures who were involved in it. We discussed a few of the intricacies of Michael Jackson's agreement with AEG, including the Promissory Note, artist advances, and the number of shows MJ was obligated to do, from 10 to 31 to 50. We went over the physical MJ went through so that AEG could acquire insurance for the tour, even though none of the tests he received were under physical strain. Finally, we discussed the miracle of March 5th, as Randy Phillips called it, going over every detail of what happened in Michael's hotel room, on the way to the O2, during the press conference, and after. With that, I'll see you in Showtime Act 2, where we discuss April, May, and June of 2009, leading to Michael Jackson's death. Oh my god, y'all, are we gagging? Did we move? Did you clock this tea? Let me know in the comments if you enjoyed part 2, and perhaps give it a like and all that jazz. A savage would really appreciate it, sister. Please check out Luna Joe / Jolanda's Michael Jackson What Did Happen After June 25th series, TeamMichaelJackson.com, the r/Michael Jackson subreddit, JacksonDynasty.net, and VindicateMJ.wordpress.com. All of these sources have been an amazing help. Of course, all source material is at the link in the description. If your work was featured in this series and not credited, please let me know, and I will document it accordingly. To keep up with updates as the series comes out, or to keep up with updates on yours truly, darling, follow me on my socials, Elon's app, aka the artist previously known as Twitter, Instagram, and Threads at _Hannah Savage. You can also check the community tab on my channel for updates as well. And I'm just saying, we get lit on Twitter and Instagram. I post exclusive sneak peeks you guys on YouTube may not see. Also, hit the super thanks if it tickles your fancy. It's your way to give a savage some change without doing anything strange, because we trying to get a new computer out here so I can get that content out faster, darling. But don't feel obligated to donate though. I appreciate you if you do, and I still appreciate you if you don't, because I know it's hot out here and these bills have been mighty disrespectful. Thank you so much for watching and for your patience with me getting this series out. Hannah does all her own stunts and still works a day job, so it takes a bit of time. Also, thank you to all the new people that have subscribed and the continued growth on this channel in my long absences. We're officially on the road to 5,000 subscribers, baby, and I am gagging. Special shoutouts to Charlie Carter, Charles Thompson, Jamin Bull, and my lovely friend Dean. Thank you again for watching, and I will see y'all on the dark side in part 3.